Yo, 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 what's up, ChronoCrew Legends? It's your boy Chronos, and welcome to part 6 of What If Deku Had Mahoraga's Adaptation. This episode? It's not just action, it's transformation. Bakugo's growth, Aries healing, Gentle's unexpected return, and Deku, he's mastering gear shift and emotional power all at once. You don't want to blink, crew. This one's deep, real, and hype all at the same time. Smash that like button. 100 likes unlocks part 7. Subscribe if you're new and welcome to the timeline. Let's ride. The aftermath of the provisional license exam left a mixed atmosphere at UA High. While most of Class 1A celebrated their newly acquired licenses, a few notable absences hung over the celebrations like storm clouds. Katsuki Bakugo stood before the faculty office, his expression a careful mask of neutrality that barely contained the simmering frustration beneath. Beside him, Todoroki maintained his characteristic cool demeanor, though the slight tension in his heterochromatic gaze betrayed his own disappointment. "You understand why you're here?" Aizawa stated rather than asked, his tired eyes moving between the two students. Failing the provisional license exam isn't just about missing a credential, it's about demonstrating a fundamental gap in your understanding of what heroism requires. Bakugo's jaw clenched slightly, but he remained silent. The old Bakugo would have erupted in defensive anger, but recent events, particularly his confrontation with Izuku and subsequent revelations about One for All, had fostered an uncharacteristic restraint. "Both of you possess exceptional combat capabilities," Aizawa continued, "but heroism requires more than just winning fights. The remedial course will address those deficiencies directly." "When does it begin?" Todoroki asked quietly, his voice carrying neither complaint nor excuse. "Tomorrow morning. You'll be joined by students from other schools who similarly failed to grasp the social aspects of hero work." Aizawa's gaze lingered on Bakugo. "This isn't punishment. It's an opportunity to address weaknesses that would otherwise limit your potential as professionals." As they left the faculty office, Bakugo's crimson eyes caught sight of a familiar figure waiting in the hallway. Izuku Midoriya, the adaptation will faintly visible behind him as he leaned against the wall. "Deku," Bakugo acknowledged, his tone neutral but lacking its former hostility. "Kaken," Izuku replied carefully. "I heard about the remedial course. Come to gloat?" Bakugo asked, though the question lacked genuine bite. The adaptation wheel pulsed gently as Izuku shook his head. "I came to offer help, actually. If you want to practice the social aspects before tomorrow." Bakugo was quiet for a moment, internal conflict evident in his expression. The gap between them had widened enormously in recent months, not just in power, but in public recognition. Izuku's position as the divine general and top-ranked examinee stood in stark contrast to Bakugo's current situation. "I don't need," Bakugo began automatically before catching himself. He exhaled slowly, the practiced response of a lifetime not easily abandoned. "Actually, that might be helpful." The admission cost him visible effort, but the fact that he made it at all spoke volumes about his growth. Todoroki watched this exchange with quiet interest, noting the fundamental shift in their dynamic since the truth about One for All had been revealed. "Meet me at training ground beta after dinner," Izuku offered. "We'll work on connecting with civilians in crisis situations." As Izuku walked away, the adaptation was spinning with measured purpose. Bakugo found himself facing unfamiliar territory, accepting help from someone he had once considered beneath him. "You've changed," Todoroki observed quietly. "So has he," Bakugo replied, watching Izuku's retreating form. "Except he was always this person underneath. I just refused to see it." The Masagaki primary school children were absolute monsters. That was Bakugo's first thought as he stared at the chaotic classroom where 20 elementary students ran wild with quirk-enhanced mischief. Desks floated near the ceiling, small fires erupted from improvised projectiles, and what appeared to be sentient clay creatures scurried across the floor in organized formations. "These brats are worse than villains," he muttered under his breath. Beside him, Todoroki remained stoically silent, though his expression suggested similar sentiments. Across the room, their remedial course partners from Shiketsu High, Kami Utsushimi and Inasa Yurashi, seemed equally overwhelmed by the unrestrained chaos. "Hello, everyone!" Inasa suddenly bellowed with characteristic enthusiasm, wind swirling dramatically around his massive frame. "We are heroes here today." His introduction was cut short by a direct hit from what appeared to be a quirk-generated slime ball. The projectile struck his face with unerring accuracy, silencing his speech mid-sentence while the children erupted in mocking laughter. "Nice try, fake hero," one particularly bold child called. Real heroes don't need special classes. Bakugo felt his temper rising but remembered Izuku's advice from their practice session the previous evening. When dealing with skeptical civilians, especially children, Izuku had explained, the adaptation will spinning gently as he outlined psychological approaches. Direct confrontation only reinforces their resistance. You have to meet them where they are emotionally before you can guide them where they need to be. Taking a deep breath, Bakugo stepped forward with uncharacteristic restraint. "You're right," he said loudly enough to be heard above the chaos. Real heroes don't need special classes. This unexpected agreement momentarily quieted the room as children turned toward him with suspicious curiosity. "I failed the license exam," Bakugo continued bluntly. "Not because I'm weak. I could beat most pro heroes in a fight, but because I didn't understand what being a hero actually means beyond winning battles." The honesty in his voice caught the children's attention. Confronted with vulnerability rather than authority, they found their reflexive resistance temporarily disarmed. "So yeah," Bakugo finished, "I'm learning, just like you are. The difference is I'm willing to admit when I need to improve." A small girl with spiral pattern hair stepped forward, her expression skeptical but engaged. "If you're so strong, why couldn't you get a license when that green-haired guy from the sports festival did? The Divine General, or whatever they call him?" The question struck closer to home than Bakugo expected. The mention of Izuku's public title and implied superiority would have triggered explosive rage only months ago. Now it simply felt like a truth he was learning to accept. "Because he understood something I didn't," Bakugo admitted, surprising even himself with his candor. "That strength without purpose is just violence. Real heroes protect people, not just defeat villains." From across the room, Gang Orca watched this exchange with growing interest. The initial assessment had suggested that Bakugo Katsuki would be the most problematic participant in the remedial course, aggressive, prideful, and resistant to feedback. Yet here he was, demonstrating genuine introspection in a way that was connecting with the children. Perhaps, Gang Orca thought, recent events had catalyzed growth that would normally take years of professional experience. "So what are you going to teach us, almost heroes?" Another child challenged, though with less hostility than before. Bakugo smiled, not his usual predatory grin, but something approaching genuine amusement. "How about this? We'll show you what we've learned about being heroes, and you show us what you know about being honest with your feelings." Seems like a fair trade. The improvised approach worked better than any planned lesson could have. Over the next several hours, the 4 provisional heroes in training engaged with the children through activities that demonstrated both the technical aspects of quirk control and the emotional intelligence required for effective heroism. Todoroki created ice sculptures that responded to the children's direction, transforming their chaotic creativity into collaborative art. Cammy used her illusion quirk to help children visualize their future hero personas. Inasa's boundless enthusiasm found constructive channels through organized physical activities that burned excess energy. And Bakugo, surprisingly, excelled at providing direct feedback that children actually respected. His bluntness, when tempered with genuine attention to their efforts, came across as refreshing honesty rather than harsh criticism. "You're holding back because you're afraid of your quirk," he told a quiet boy whose fingers generated small electrical discharges. "That fear makes your control worse, not better. Watch." He demonstrated controlled explosion techniques, showing how precision came from confidence rather than hesitation. "Start small, master that completely, then increase gradually. Fear makes you skip steps." By the session's end, the classroom had transformed from chaotic battlefield to productive workshop. Children who had initially rejected hero guidance now listened attentively, their natural skepticism channeled toward constructive questioning rather than reflexive rebellion. As the students filed out at day's end, Gang Orca approached the 4 provisional heroes with evaluative purpose. "Unexpected approaches," he noted, "but effective ones. Particularly you, Bakugo. Your file suggested resistance to emotional growth, yet you demonstrated remarkable adaptability today." Bakugo's expression remained neutral, though something like pride flickered in his crimson eyes. "I had a good example recently," he said cryptically. "Someone who showed me what adaptation really means." While Bakugo and Todoroki worked through their remedial course, Izuku found himself in a different kind of training entirely. Deep within the forest area of UA's expansive grounds, he sat in meditative posture, The adaptation will fully manifested behind him as he communed with the vestiges of One for All. The metaphysical space where the previous wielders existed had become increasingly accessible as his control over One for All developed. No longer just fleeting glimpses, he could now engage in direct conversation with those who had carried the power before him. Your adaptation ability continues to evolve beyond our expectations, Nana Shimura observed, her presence carrying the warm strength that had guided All Might's development. It's creating synergies with One for All that none of us could have anticipated. The wheel processes everything, Izuku explained, watching as energy patterns flowed between his unique ability and the accumulated power of previous generations. Not just physical challenges, but conceptual ones too. It's like it's learning the fundamental principles behind each of your quirks, not just mimicking their effects. That's precisely what makes it so extraordinary, a new voice stated, drawing Izuku's attention to a figure he hadn't fully communicated with before. The seventh wielder stepped forward, his presence carrying calculating precision that contrasted with Nana's warm intensity. Tashitsugu Kudo, he introduced himself formally. My original quirk was Gearshift, the ability to adjust operational parameters of both mechanical systems and energy utilization. You're the last one, Izuku realized, understanding the significance of this interaction. The final vestige to fully manifest. Kudo nodded, studying the adaptation wheel with professional interest. Your ability creates fascinating possibilities for gearshift integration. Where my original power required precise understanding of systems before modification, your adaptation wheel processes those systems automatically. The implications were extraordinary. Gearshift would allow Izuku to adjust the settings of both physical objects and energy patterns, including how One for All distributed through his own body. With proper application, Kudo continued, you could theoretically operate at 100% output indefinitely, using Gearshift to continuously recalibrate your biological systems to handle the energy flow. That would mean, Izuku began, the potential almost too extraordinary to articulate. Full access to One for All's complete capabilities without physical limitation. Nana confirmed, her expression reflecting both excitement and concern. But the adaptation process required would be extreme, pushing your ability beyond anything you've attempted before. The first wielder stepped forward, his primal connection to One for All's origins carrying authority that transcended generations. This is the culmination of our power, he stated simply. The reason One for All has grown through successive wielders to eventually reach someone capable of using its full potential. But am I ready? Izuku asked, genuine uncertainty in his voice despite his recent accomplishments. The adaptation will has limits. Pushing too far too fast could be dangerous. Which is precisely why we're training you here, Nana replied with gentle firmness. Each of us will guide you through mastering our individual contributions before attempting full integration. The vestige space transformed around them, creating simulated environments where Izuku could practice with each aspect of One for All under the direct tutelage of its original wielders. For what felt like hours but might have been mere minutes in the physical world, he trained with focused intensity. Black Whip's creator taught him fine control techniques that transformed raw power into precision utility. Float's original wielder demonstrated three-dimensional combat applications that expanded mobility options beyond conventional understanding. Danger Sense's developer showed him how to filter threat assessment to prevent information overload. And finally, Kudo began the process of integrating Gearshift with Izuku's existing capabilities, teaching him to consciously adjust energy parameters that had previously required the adaptation wheel's automatic processing. The wheel is extraordinary, Kudo explained as they worked, but true mastery means understanding its operations consciously, not just relying on instinctive adaptation. As the training session concluded and Izuku prepared to return to full consciousness, the first wielder offered a final observation that carried both warning and promise. Your greatest strength isn't the adaptation wheel itself, he said quietly, but your ability to remain yourself despite the power you wield. Never lose sight of why you wanted to become a hero, Izuku Midoriya. That purpose is what makes adaptation meaningful rather than merely efficient. When Izuku opened his physical eyes, the forest around him had transitioned from afternoon sunlight to early evening shadows. Hours had passed in what felt like moments, yet the training's effects remained. not just in power development but in deeper understanding of One for All's true nature. The adaptation wheel pulsed with renewed purpose as he stood, processing the integrated knowledge from 7 generations of heroes who had carried the same torch through increasingly darker times. Whatever comes next, Izuku thought with quiet determination, I'm getting closer to being ready. The UA campus buzzed with enthusiastic energy as preparations for the school festival reached fever pitch. After months of intense villain confrontations and public scrutiny, the opportunity to showcase more lighthearted aspects of hero education had lifted everyone's spirits. Class 1A's common room had transformed into a makeshift planning center with students gathered around Ida as he outlined their festival contribution with characteristic precision. A music and dance performance, he announced, arms chopping emphatically through the air. Something that demonstrates both our technical capabilities and our unified spirit as future heroes. Music? Kaminari questioned skeptically. I mean, who among us actually has performance skills? That's exactly the point, Mina interjected with bubbling enthusiasm. It's about stepping outside our comfort zones. Heroes need to adapt to all kinds of situations, right? The word adapt caught Izuku's attention. The adaptation while manifesting faintly behind him as he considered the concept from a different perspective. Heroism wasn't just about combat adaptation. It was about responding appropriately to whatever society needed, whether protection from villains or inspiration through positive examples. I think it's a great idea, he said, drawing surprised looks from classmates who associated him more with intense training than recreational activities. After everything that's happened, people need to see that heroes can bring joy, not just security. Bakugo recently returned from his successful completion of the Remedial course, made a dismissive sound but didn't actually object. His relationship with class activities had shifted subtly since his confrontation with Izuku, less automatically oppositional, more selectively engaged. If we're doing this, he said finally, then we do it right. Half-assed performances are worse than none at all. What instrument can you play, Bakugo? Kirishima asked with genuine curiosity. A hint of embarrassment colored Bakugo's expression before he masked it with his usual confidence. Drums, he admitted. My mom made me take lessons as a kid to burn off energy. This unexpected revelation triggered cascading disclosures throughout the class. Jiru's extensive musical background, Todoroki's traditional flute training during his limited recreational time, Momo's classical piano education. Even Itsuka Kendo from Class 1B, who had joined their planning session, revealed experience with traditional dance from her martial arts background. This could actually work, Ida said with growing excitement. A performance that showcases both our individual talents and our collective harmony. Planning evolved rapidly, with Jiru naturally assuming musical direction while Mina coordinated dance elements. Students gravitated toward roles that matched their capabilities, some performing, others handling technical aspects, all contributing to a unified vision. Amidst this enthusiastic collaboration, Izuku found himself temporarily distanced from the immediate planning. His mind kept returning to his training with the One for All vestiges, particularly Gearshift's integration potential. While his classmates prepared for joyful celebration, he carried knowledge of threats that could emerge at any moment. You seem distracted, Uraraka observed, sitting beside him with genuine concern in her warm eyes. Everything okay? The adaptation wheel pulsed gently as Izuku considered how much to share. Just thinking about balance, he said carefully, between preparing for threats and enjoying normal life. That's what this festival is about, isn't it? She replied with characteristic insight. Showing that heroes aren't just emergency responders. We're also part of the community we protect. Her perspective shifted something in Izuku's thinking. The adaptation wheel processed not just physical threats but psychological approaches to heroism itself. Perhaps participation in joyful community activities wasn't a distraction from hero work but an essential component of what made protection meaningful. You're right, he acknowledged, genuine appreciation warming his voice. Thanks for the reminder. Their conversation was interrupted by Aizawa's arrival, his perpetually tired expression carrying additional weight that suggested significant news. Midoriya, he said without preamble. Principal Nizu wants to see you. It's about a visitor to the festival. The common room quieted as classmates recognized the serious undertone in their teacher's voice. When Aizawa spoke that way, it typically involved matters beyond routine school operations. Is something wrong? Izuku asked, the adaptation wheel expanding slightly as it processed potential threats. Not wrong, Aizawa clarified, but significant. The girl from the Shai Hasaikai raid, Eri, has been cleared for a supervised visit to the festival. Given your role in her rescue, Nizu thought you should be involved in the planning. The news hit Izuku like an electrical current. Eri, the traumatized child whose rescue had cost Mirio his quirk, would be experiencing her first public event after a lifetime of isolation and abuse. The responsibility felt enormous yet deeply meaningful. "Of course," he replied immediately. "When can I meet with them?" As he followed Aizawa toward the administrative building, Izuku's mind raced with implications. For Eri, the festival wouldn't just be entertainment. It would be a fundamental introduction to normal human joy after years of systematic suffering. The adaptation will spun with protective purpose as he realized the true significance of what they were planning. This wasn't just a school event. For at least one small visitor, it could be the beginning of genuine healing. The recovery ward where Eri resided represented an uncomfortable compromise between medical necessity and normal childhood environment. Medical equipment lined the walls, monitoring the unstable quirk that had made her both victim and unwilling weapon under Overhaul's control. Yet colorful decorations and carefully selected toys attempted to introduce elements of ordinary childhood into her extraordinary circumstances. Mirio Togata sat beside her bed, his characteristic enthusiasm somehow maintained despite the loss of his quirk. He was reading from an illustrated hero story, his animated gestures and voice modulation drawing rare smiles from the white-haired child. When Izuku entered alongside Principal Nizu, Eri's crimson eyes immediately fixed on him with an intensity that spoke to her perfect memory of their rescue encounter. The adaptation will manifested fully as it processed her emotional state. Not fearful as during their first meeting, but carrying cautious hope that remained fragile. "Deku," she said quietly, using the hero name she had heard during their dramatic escape. "Hello, Eri," Izuku replied gently, approaching with careful movements that respected her history of abuse. "How are you feeling today?" She considered the question with the seriousness of someone unaccustomed to having her feelings acknowledged. "Better," she decided finally. "Mirio-san has been telling me about the festival." "Indeed I have," Mirio exclaimed with characteristic volume that somehow didn't startle her despite its intensity. "I've been explaining all the wonderful experiences awaiting at a UA festival." His enthusiasm remained undimmed by recent tragedies, the loss of his quirk, the temporary suspension of his hero career, the uncertainty about his future. If anything, these challenges had only reinforced his determination to embody heroic optimism, especially for those who needed it most. "That's actually why we're here," Principal Nizu explained, his sophisticated voice carrying warmth despite his unusual appearance. "The medical team believes a supervised festival visit could be beneficial for Eri's recovery. Familiar faces would make that experience more comfortable." The implication was clear. Izuku and Mirio, as the heroes directly involved in her rescue, represented safety figures whose presence could help her navigate unfamiliar social territory. "Would you like that, Eri?" Izuku asked, ensuring her own wishes remained central rather than assuming what was best for her. "Visiting the festival with us?" Her small hands clutched the blanket as she processed the question. After a lifetime where choices were non-existent, even small decisions carried overwhelming weight. "Will there be other people?" she asked finally, uncertainty evident in her voice. "Yes," Izuku answered honestly, knowing that false reassurance would ultimately damage the trust they were carefully building. "Many students and some visitors. But Mirio and I will stay with you the entire time, and you can leave whenever you want." The adaptation will process her micro-expressions, detecting both anxiety and cautious interest warring beneath her outwardly calm demeanor. This would be her first voluntary interaction with society beyond medical personnel. A massive step for someone whose entire life had been defined by isolation and exploitation. "I think," she began carefully, "I would like to try." Her courage in facing something so fundamentally frightening after everything she had endured struck Izuku with powerful emotional force. The adaptation will pulsed with protective determination as he made a silent promise that her first experience with normal social joy would be positive and healing. "Then we'll make sure it's amazing," he promised, his voice carrying absolute certainty that made her crimson eyes widen slightly. "A festival you'll never forget." As they discussed practical arrangements, timing, duration, security considerations, Izuku's mind returned to his class's performance planning. What had initially seemed like a simple recreational activity now carried profound importance. For Eri, their performance wouldn't just be entertainment. It would be her introduction to the concept that life could contain joy without attached pain. When the meeting concluded and they prepared to leave, Eri's small voice stopped Izuku at the doorway. "Deku," she said hesitantly, "will there be apples?" The question seemed odd until Mirio explained later that apples had become her favorite food, something sweet that she'd been denied during her captivity, and now represented small joys she was learning to appreciate. Absolutely, Izuku promised, the adaptation will spinning with quiet purpose. The sweetest apples you've ever tasted. The days leading up to the festival transformed UA's campus into a hive of creative activity. Each class developed unique contributions that showcased their particular talents, while support corps students engineered increasingly elaborate technical systems for staging and effects. Class 1. A's music and dance performance evolved rapidly under Jairu's surprisingly effective direction. What had begun as an amateur enthusiasm project developed professional polish as students discovered untapped talents and unexpected collaborations. Bakugo's drumming provided a powerful foundation that anchored more experimental elements. Todoroki's traditional flute created haunting melodies that Jairu integrated with modern electronic components. Itsuka's graceful movements became central choreography elements that other students emulated with varying degrees of success. Throughout these preparations, Izuku balanced multiple responsibilities: performance practice, security planning for Eri's visit, and continued development of his gearshift integration. The adaptation will remain in constant processing mode, analyzing each challenge and developing increasingly sophisticated responses. On the evening before the festival, Izuku volunteered for a final supply run into the shopping district. The errand served practical needs while providing brief solitude to process everything that had been developing simultaneously. The adaptation will spun quietly behind him as he made his purchases, additional materials for stage decorations, specialty candy that Sada had requested for his baking contribution, and a bag of particularly perfect apples that he'd searched 3 stores to find. As he turned toward campus with his bags, a peculiar sensation caused the adaptation wheel to expand dramatically. Danger sense activated at low-level intensity. Not immediate threat, but potential conflict approaching from an unexpected vector. Divine General, a refined male voice called from the alleyway ahead. What a fascinating coincidence. The figure who emerged carried himself with theatrical grace that immediately registered as performative rather than natural. His elegant attire and styled hair suggested someone playing a role rather than expressing genuine personality. Or perhaps, the man continued, not coincidence at all, but fate arranging our meeting before tomorrow's grand performance. The adaptation will process this unexpected encounter with increasing intensity, detecting subtle threat patterns despite the man's outwardly civilized demeanor. This wasn't a random civilian encounter. It carried purpose that activated defensive protocols. I don't believe we've met, Izuku replied carefully, maintaining casual posture while internally preparing for potential conflict. How terribly rude of me, the man said with exaggerated formality. Gentle criminal at your service. Perhaps you've heard of my artistic approach to societal commentary. The name registered immediately from hero briefings. A villain whose elaborate performances targeted institutions he deemed corrupt or hypocritical. Not violently dangerous like the League of Villains, but unpredictable and technically skilled. And my charming assistant, Gentle continued, gesturing toward the shadows where a small, pink-haired woman emerged with recording equipment, La Brava, documenting our encounters for posterity. You're planning something at the festival, Izuku realized. The adaptation will processing tactical implications alongside potential civilian risk. That's why you're here. Gentle's expression shifted to one of theatrical appreciation. Such perception. This is why you've earned your divine title, Young Hero. Indeed, tomorrow's festival presents an irresistible canvas for our artistic statement about UA's institutional hypocrisy. The situation crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't coincidental. Gentle had likely been conducting reconnaissance for his planned intrusion when their paths crossed. Now Izuku faced a tactical decision. Engage immediately or allow them to proceed with planning while alerting UA security. The adaptation will analyze multiple variables simultaneously. Civilian presence in the shopping district, Gentle's known capabilities, the festival security vulnerabilities, and most significantly, Eri's planned visit that could be disrupted by criminal performance art. I can't let you target the festival, Izuku stated firmly, setting his purchases carefully aside as one for all energy began circulating through his system. Too many people have worked too hard for their efforts to be hijacked for your purposes. How disappointing, Gentle sighed theatrically. I had hoped for appreciation of artistic necessity from someone of your reputation. No matter, this encounter shall simply become prologue to tomorrow's masterpiece. What followed was a battle unlike any Izuku had previously experienced. Where most villains relied on straightforward power or tactical advantage, Gentle Criminal's approach was fundamentally performative, each attack choreographed for maximum visual impact rather than combat efficiency. His quirk, elasticity, allowed him to transform air itself into elastic barriers and trampolines, creating unpredictable movement patterns that combined gymnastic grace with tactical unpredictability. It wasn't particularly destructive, but its defensive applications made conventional attacks frustratingly ineffective. The adaptation wheel expanded to full manifestation as it processed this unusual combat style. Traditional fighting approaches proved inadequate against someone who treated battle as performance art rather than genuine conflict. Marvelous adaptation, Gentle called as Izuku adjusted his approach in real time. Your reputation is well-deserved. La Brava continued recording from relative safety, her excited commentary suggesting this encounter was already being mentally edited for dramatic presentation on whatever platform they used to share their performances. Izuku increased his output to 60%, green lightning crackling around his form as he implemented gear shift for the first time in actual combat. The newly integrated quirk allowed him to adjust his energy distribution with unprecedented precision, focusing one for all through optimized pathways that enhance speed without proportional strain. Extraordinary, Gentle exclaimed as Izuku's movement patterns became increasingly difficult to predict. The Divine General truly lives up to his title, but as the battle progressed, something unusual occurred. Rather than growing desperate as victory became increasingly unlikely, Gentle seemed almost satisfied with the encounter itself, as if the quality of the performance mattered more than its outcome. The adaptation will process this psychological pattern alongside combat data, developing an approach that targeted Gentle's underlying motivations rather than just his physical capabilities. Why are you really doing this? Izuku asked during a momentary pause in their exchange. It's not just about making a statement, is it? Something flickered in Gentle's expression, a break in the theatrical persona that revealed genuine emotion beneath the performance. Recognition, he admitted with surprising candor. A place in history that acknowledges my existence. The adaptation will process this revelation, connecting it to psychological patterns that suggested deeper wounds beneath flamboyant presentation. This wasn't just criminal behavior, it was a desperate attempt to matter in a world that had consistently ignored genuine contribution. There are better ways to be remembered, Izuku said, deactivating his full cowling as he recognized that combat wasn't the appropriate solution to what was fundamentally an emotional problem. Ways that build rather than disrupt. Perhaps for those with your natural gifts, Gentle replied with unexpected bitterness. Some of us lack the luxury of inherent significance. The comment struck uncomfortably close to Izuku's pre-quirk experience, the desperation to matter in a world that assigned value primarily through power. The adaptation wheel pulsed with empathetic understanding even as it maintained tactical awareness. I was bullied when I was a kid because of my quirk, Izuku said quietly, the admission drawing shocked expressions from both Gentle and La Brava. I know what it feels like to be invisible. To watch others receive recognition that seems forever beyond your reach. The revelation landed with impact that no physical attack could have achieved. Gentle's theatrical persona faltered completely, replaced by genuine surprise and reluctant connection. Impossible, he murmured. People can change, Izuku continued, sensing the potential for genuine breakthrough. They can find meaning beyond public recognition. They can build rather than destroy. He extended his hand not as a combat gesture, but as a human connection. It's not too late to choose a different path. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, potential violence transforming into something more complex and ultimately more meaningful. La Brava lowered her recording equipment, her expression reflecting confusion at this unexpected development. A different path, Gentle repeated softly, the theatrical affectation gone from his voice. After so many years of this one, heroes adapt, Izuku said simply, the wheel behind him pulsing with quiet certainty. Why can't villains? The question hung in the air between them, carrying possibility that transcended their initial confrontation. For a moment, it seemed that Gentle might actually accept the offered alternative, a recognition deeper than public spectacle, a connection that acknowledged his humanity rather than just his criminal persona. But before he could respond, police sirens sounded in the distance, approaching rapidly. Someone had reported their confrontation, and official response was imminent. It seems our performance must conclude earlier than anticipated, Gentle said, his theatrical manner returning though lacking its previous conviction. Until next time, Divine General. He activated his elasticity quirk for a rapid escape, creating aerial trampolines that launched both himself and La Brava beyond immediate pursuit. But as they disappeared into the night, his final words carried unexpected sincerity. Perhaps there is something to adaptation after all. As Izuku gathered his scattered purchases and continued toward campus, the adaptation wheel processed not just the combat data but the psychological implications of their exchange. Not every confrontation required physical victory to achieve meaningful resolution. Sometimes adaptation meant recognizing when connection might accomplish what combat could not. The morning of the UA School Festival arrived with perfect weather and enthusiastic energy that permeated the entire campus. Despite enhanced security measures implemented after Izuku's encounter with Gentle Criminal, the atmosphere remained celebratory rather than restrictive. Class 1A's performance preparations had reached their final stage, with students making last-minute adjustments to costumes, instruments, and choreography. The chaotic energy of their common room resembled professional backstage environments, complete with performance anxiety and technical troubleshooting. "Bakugo, can you hit that rhythm section one more time?" Jaira called, her earphone jacks connected to sound equipment as she made final adjustments. "I think we need slightly more emphasis on the downbeat." Surprisingly, Bakugo complied without complaint, his drumming showcasing technical precision that contradicted his explosive personality. His recent growth, accelerated by the remedial course and ongoing reassessment of his approach to heroism, manifested in moments like these, where collaboration took precedence over individual dominance. Across the room, Izuku helped Itsuka and Mina finalize movement sequences that would complement the musical composition. The adaptation will process choreographic patterns alongside security considerations, part of his mind constantly alert for potential disruptions despite Gentle's apparent withdrawal. Midoriya Ida approached with characteristic formality. The security team confirms that Eri and Mirio have arrived at the main entrance. "Should we proceed with the planned escort?" The reminder of their special guest refocused Izuku's attention completely. While the performance carried importance for the entire class, its significance for one small visitor transcended standard entertainment value. "I'll get them," he replied, already moving toward the door. "The rest of you finish preparation. This needs to be perfect." As he navigated the increasingly crowded campus, students and visitors alike recognized him immediately, some pointing and whispering about the Divine General, who had topped the provisional license exam rankings. The public attention still felt uncomfortable, especially when it focused on his power rather than his intentions. At the main entrance, Mirio stood with characteristic perfect posture, his bright smile unchanged despite the loss of his quirk. Beside him, Eri looked almost unrecognizable compared to their first meeting. Clean, properly dressed, and showing subtle signs of healing despite her continued medical monitoring. "Midoriya," Mirio called with enthusiasm that drew attention from nearby visitors. "Our festival adventure begins." Eri's crimson eyes fixed on Izuku with quiet intensity, searching for reassurance amidst the overwhelming sensory experience of her first public event. The adaptation will manifested fully as it processed her emotional state. Cautious but not terrified, curious despite lingering anxiety. "Hello, Eri," Izuku said gently, kneeling to her eye level rather than looming over her. "Are you ready for the festival?" She nodded solemnly, her small hand clutching Mirio's with the instinctive trust she developed during his regular hospital visits. "Mirio-san says there will be candy apples," she said quietly, as if confirming a crucial detail. "Absolutely," Izuku confirmed with matching seriousness. "And many other wonderful things you've never tried before. We'll go slowly, and you can tell us anytime if something feels too much. Okay?" Her nod carried more confidence this time. The simple acknowledgement that her feelings mattered represented profound progress for someone whose entire existence had previously been defined by others' demands. What followed was a carefully structured introduction to festival experiences, with both Izuku and Mirio constantly monitoring Eri's responses to ensure positive engagement without overwhelming stimulation. They visited food stalls where she cautiously tried sweet treats that elicited rare smiles. They watched support course demonstrations that showcased creative applications of hero technology. They participated in simple games that introduced concepts of play she'd never experienced. Throughout this guided exploration, the adaptation wheel remained in active processing mode, analyzing Eri's reactions and developing increasingly refined approaches to her socialization. Each positive response reinforced pathways that made subsequent experiences more accessible. Each moment of hesitation provided data for adjusted introduction methods. "She's doing remarkably well," Mirio observed quietly during a brief moment when Eri was distracted by a particularly fascinating support course display. The medical team wasn't sure she could handle this much social interaction so soon. "She's adapting," Izuku replied, watching as she cautiously approached a demonstration that caught her interest. finding her own balance between curiosity and caution. "Rather like someone else I know," Mirio said with knowing smile. The divine general himself started as someone uncomfortable with his own power, didn't he? The observation was uncomfortably perceptive, highlighting parallels between Eri's journey and Izuku's own development. Both had received abilities that initially seemed overwhelming. Both were learning to integrate power with purpose rather than being defined by capability alone. Their philosophical exchange was interrupted by Eri's return, her expression carrying subtle animation that represented extraordinary progress for someone whose emotional range had been systematically suppressed. "Deku," she said quietly, "when is your performance?" Mirio-san said you're making music. The simple question carried deeper significance, her first expression of forward-looking interest rather than just responding to immediate experiences. The adaptation will pulsed with something approaching joy as it processed this developmental milestone. "Very soon," he promised. "And we made it especially for people who haven't experienced much happiness before. People like you, Eri." Her crimson eyes widened slightly at this revelation. The concept that others had created something specifically considering her experience was clearly novel and meaningful. "For me?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "For everyone," Izuku clarified gently, "but with special thought for you, because everyone deserves to experience joy, especially those who haven't had enough of it." The sentiment settled over her with visible impact, her small shoulders straightening slightly as she processed being valued for herself rather than for what could be extracted from her. It was a fundamental reframing of her place in the world, from tool to person, from means to end. "I want to see it," she said finally, her voice carrying quiet determination that hadn't been present before. As they made their way toward Class 1A's performance venue, Izuku's comm device activated with a security alert. The message was brief but significant. Surveillance systems had detected Gentle Criminal and La Brava near the campus perimeter, though they appeared to be observing rather than attempting infiltration. The adaptation will process this information alongside their current situation. Direct confrontation would disrupt Eri's carefully structured experience. Ignoring potential threat could endanger the entire festival. Neither option seemed optimal. "Problem?" Mirio asked, noting Izuku's momentary distraction. "Possibly," he replied quietly. "Security alert, but not immediate danger. I need to check something quickly before our performance." Mirio's expression shifted to serious understanding. Despite losing his quirk, his hero instincts remained fully intact. "I'll continue with Eri. Join us when you can." As Izuku moved toward the perimeter location indicated in the alert, the adaptation will expanded to combat readiness. If Gentle had reconsidered their previous encounter and decided to proceed with his original plan, direct intervention would be necessary regardless of timing inconvenience. What he found, however, defied expectation. Gentle and La Brava sat on a public bench outside campus boundaries, apparently making no attempt at concealment or infiltration. Their recording equipment was present but inactive, suggesting observation rather than documentation. "Divine General," Gentle acknowledged as Izuku approached cautiously. "Precisely on schedule as anticipated." "You're not attempting entry," Izuku observed, "the adaptation wheel processing this unexpected development." "As you suggested," Gentle replied with surprising sincerity beneath his theatrical manner. "Adaptation sometimes means reconsidering one's approach. We came to observe rather than disrupt, to understand what creates such institutional loyalty despite systemic limitations." The explanation seemed genuine despite its formal delivery. The adaptation will process subtle indicators that suggested authentic reconsideration rather than tactical deception. "The festival means a lot to many people," Izuku said carefully, "including a child who's experiencing social joy for the first time after years of systematic abuse." La Brava's expression softened visibly at this revelation, while Gentle's theatrical composure faltered briefly. "We had no intention of disrupting genuine healing," he said quietly. "Our targets are institutions, not individuals, especially not children." "Sometimes," Izuku suggested, recognizing potential for meaningful connection, "the best way to understand an institution is to experience its positive aspects firsthand, not just observe from outside." He made a decision that security protocols would likely consider questionable, but human connection suggested was appropriate. "Would you like to attend as guests rather than observers? With me as escort to ensure mutual comfort." The invitation clearly surprised both Gentle and La Brava, their expressions registering genuine shock at being offered legitimate participation rather than adversarial engagement. "You would trust us within security perimeters?" Gentle asked skeptically. "After our previous encounter? Trust is earned through actions," Izuku replied. The adaptation will processing relative risk against potential benefit. Consider this an opportunity to experience what you were planning to critique, from the inside rather than outside. The unconventional approach created momentary uncertainty, but ultimately Gentle nodded with cautious acceptance. An intriguing proposition. Perhaps direct experience will indeed provide perspective that external observation cannot. As they proceeded through security protocols with Izuku's provisional license providing necessary authorization for visitor escorts, the adaptation will maintain vigilant monitoring while recognizing the potential significance of this experimental approach. Sometimes meaningful security came through connection rather than exclusion. By the time they reached Class 1A's performance venue, final preparations were already underway. Backstage chaos reflected the nervous energy of students preparing for their first major public presentation, with Ida's authoritative organization barely maintaining structural order amidst creative anxiety. Midoriya, he called with evident relief upon seeing Izuku arrive. We're scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Your costume is prepared and... He paused, noticing the unexpected companions. Who are these visitors? Special guests, Izuku explained carefully. The adaptation will processing potential complications alongside integration opportunities. They're here to experience our performance under my supervision. Ida's expression suggested questions that professional courtesy prevented him from asking directly, but he ultimately nodded with acceptance of Izuku's judgment. Very well. Please ensure they're properly seated before we begin. Mirio and the young girl are already in the front row. As Izuku guided Gentle and La Brava towards seating areas, he noticed Aizawa watching their interaction with calculating assessment. Their homeroom teacher missed nothing, and the presence of unscheduled visitors would certainly register as potentially significant. Your teacher seems concerned, Gentle observed quietly. He protects his students, Izuku replied simply. It's his job to question unfamiliar elements, just as it's mine to recognize when potential adversaries might become something else instead. This statement seemed to impact Gentle more profoundly than expected, his theatrical demeanor momentarily giving way to genuine reflection. A nuanced perspective from someone so young, he murmured. Perhaps Yue develops more than just combat capabilities after all. As they reached the seating area, Izuku caught sight of Mirio and Eri in the front row. The small girl's expression brightened visibly upon seeing him, her cautious animation suggesting successful continuation of her positive festival experience. I need to join my class for the performance, Izuku explained to his unexpected guests. Please enjoy the show, it represents something important about what heroes can contribute beyond just fighting villains. With that, he hurried backstage to complete final preparations, the adaptation while processing multiple simultaneous considerations, performance requirements, security awareness, and the potential significance of bringing former adversaries into collaborative space rather than maintaining oppositional dynamics. Who were those people? Uraraka asked as she helped him with final costume adjustments. I didn't recognize them from campus. Potential friends, Izuku replied after careful consideration. People who might see things differently after today. The adaptation will pulsed with quiet certainty as Class 1A assembled for their entrance. Sometimes the most important adaptations weren't physical at all, but conceptual, evolving understanding rather than just capability. The performance itself transcended everyone's expectations. What had begun as amateur enthusiasm evolved into something genuinely moving, a musical and dance presentation that showcased not just technical skill but authentic expression of what heroism meant beyond combat applications. Jiru's musical direction created emotional resonance that connected performers and audience through shared experience, rather than just entertainment. Bakugo's powerful drumming provided foundation that supported rather than dominated. Todoroki's traditional elements blended seamlessly with modern components, creating harmonies that represented the integration of diverse approaches toward shared purpose. From his position in the performance, Izuku could see Eri's reaction in the front row. Her crimson eyes were wide with wonder, her small form completely still as she absorbed music that might represent her first experience of artistic expression, untainted by trauma or exploitation. Beside her, Mirio's characteristic enthusiasm had transformed into something quieter but no less powerful, protective joy that celebrated her healing journey while acknowledging the significance of each small step forward. And further back, Gentle and La Brava watched with expressions that suggested unexpected emotional impact. Whatever they had anticipated from UA's festival, the authentic artistic communication they were witnessing clearly transcended their preconceived notions of institutional performance. As the final musical sequence built toward emotional climax, the adaptation wheel expanded fully behind Izuku, processing not just his performance responsibilities but the culmination of everything this moment represented for Eri, for his classmates, for potential social connections that transcended conventional hero-villain dynamics. The applause that followed their conclusion carried genuine appreciation rather than mere politeness. Students and visitors alike responded to something authentic in their presentation. A reminder that heroism encompassed joy and community alongside protection and security. When Izuku made his way through post-performance congratulations to check on their special guests, he found Eri still sitting quietly, her expression thoughtful rather than animated. "Did you like it?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her with careful attention to her comfort. She considered the question with characteristic seriousness, processing feelings that might be entirely new experiences. "It made my chest feel warm," she said finally. "Is that happiness?" The simple question carried heartbreaking significance. A child so systematically denied normal emotional experience that she couldn't even identify basic feelings without assistance. The adaptation will pulsed with protective determination as Izuku nodded confirmation. "That's exactly what happiness feels like," he assured her. "And you'll feel it more and more as you continue healing." "I want to," she said quietly, her voice carrying determination beyond her years. "Feel more happiness. Learn what other feelings are called." The developmental milestone hit Izuku with unexpected emotional force. This wasn't just cognitive progress but fundamental healing. A traumatized child expressing forward-looking intention rather than just reactive survival. "You will," he promised. "The adaptation will spinning with absolute certainty. We'll help you experience all the feelings that were taken from you before." As festival activities continued throughout the day, Izuku divided his attention between multiple responsibilities, ensuring Eri's continued positive experience, monitoring Gentle and La Brava's campus presence, and participating in his classmates' celebratory aftermath. By evening, when Eri was safely returned to medical supervision with new memories and experiences to process, Izuku found Gentle and La Brava waiting near the campus exit, their expressions suggesting significant internal reconsideration. "Quite an illuminating experience," Gentle acknowledged as Izuku approached. "Not what we anticipated from UA's public presentation." "Institutions are made of people," Izuku replied simply, with complex motivations and genuine intentions alongside whatever systematic limitations exist. La Brava, who had remained largely silent throughout their visit, suddenly spoke with unexpected directness. "That little girl, the one in the front row, she's the child you mentioned, isn't she? The one experiencing happiness for the first time." The adaptation will process her tone, detecting genuine empathetic concern rather than manipulative interest. "Yes," Izuku confirmed. "Her name is Eri. Today was her first festival, her first experience of public joy without attached trauma. And your class performed specifically with her healing in mind," Gentle concluded, his theatrical manner completely absent as he processed this information. Not for recognition or assessment, but for genuine human impact. The observation carried weight beyond its literal meaning, recognition that hero activities encompassed more than just the combat applications that received public attention. The adaptation will process this potential shift in perspective as potentially more significant than any physical victory could have been. "Heroism takes many forms," Izuku said simply. "Sometimes the most important ones don't make headlines." As they departed, Gentle's final words carried unexpected sincerity beneath formal delivery. "Perhaps we have been critiquing the wrong aspects of hero society, La Brava. Institutional structures warrant examination, but individual intentions clearly transcend systematic limitations in ways we've failed to acknowledge." The adaptation will process this exchange as Izuku watched them leave campus boundaries without incident. Not every confrontation required combat resolution. Sometimes the most meaningful adaptations came through connection rather than conflict. The UA common room fell silent as students gathered around the television broadcast. The annual hero rankings announcement always generated intense interest, but this year carried unprecedented significance. The first rankings published since All Might's retirement had created a leadership vacuum at Hero Society's pinnacle. And now, the announcer's voice carried dramatic tension that matched the moment's historical significance. The new #1 hero position. With the retirement of the irreplaceable symbol of peace, who will ascend to this most challenging role? The room's atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as footage showed professional heroes assembled for the official announcement. Among them, Endeavor's imposing figure stood with characteristic intensity, his flaming costume creating visual dominance that matched his long-standing number 2 position. Based on case resolution rates, civilian approval metrics, and leadership capabilities, the announcer continued, the new number 1 hero is Endeavor. The announcement triggered mixed reactions throughout the common room. Some students applauded the logical progression. Endeavor's raw statistics certainly justified the promotion. Others remained awkwardly silent, aware of complicated history that made this ascension less straightforward than numbers alone might suggest. Todoroki's expression remained carefully neutral, though the subtle tension in his heterochromatic gaze suggested complex emotions beneath his controlled exterior. His relationship with his father carried historical weight that transcended professional assessment. "He's got big shoes to fill," Kaminari observed, stating what everyone was thinking but few wanted to verbalize. All Might wasn't just strong. He made people feel safe. "That's the real challenge," Izuku agreed, the adaptation wheel spinning quietly as it processed the broader implications. "It's not just about power or effectiveness, it's about providing psychological security during crisis situations." As Endeavor stepped forward to accept the position with characteristic intensity rather than All Might's reassuring charisma, Izuku found himself considering deeper questions about heroic symbolism and social psychology. All Might's unique contribution hadn't been just physical capability but emotional resonance that transcended individual incidents. Can someone like Endeavor, whose approach has always prioritized effectiveness over inspiration, truly fill that psychological role? The adaptation wheel processed alongside broader social implications. Or does hero society need to evolve beyond dependence on singular symbols? The broadcast continued with interviews and analysis, professionals discussing what this transition meant for hero society's future development. Hawks, the newly announced number 2 hero whose youth and unconventional approach had accelerated his rise through rankings, offered particularly insightful commentary about evolving beyond symbolic dependence toward collaborative security models. "The era of the singular symbol of peace has concluded," he observed with characteristic casual delivery that belied strategic thinking. "Perhaps what society needs now isn't another individual savior, but a network of heroes who collectively provide what All Might delivered alone." The perspective resonated with Izuku's developing understanding of heroism's social function. The adaptation will process connections between individual capability and systemic effectiveness, considering how collaborative approaches might address vulnerabilities inherent in symbolic dependence. "Midoriya," Todoroki said quietly as the broadcast shifted to commercial break, "would you join me upstairs? There's something I'd like to discuss privately." The unusual request from his typically reserved classmate triggered increased processing from the adaptation wheel, which detected emotional undertones that suggested significant personal implications. Together they moved to the dormitory roof where privacy allowed conversation beyond classmates' observation. For several moments, Todoroki simply stared across the campus grounds, his dual-colored hair shifting in the evening breeze. When he finally spoke, his voice carried uncharacteristic vulnerability despite his controlled delivery. "My father called earlier," he said without preamble. "He wants me to observe his first major operation as number 1 hero. Something about demonstrating the Todoroki legacy continuing through generations." The adaptation will process the complex emotions beneath this seemingly straightforward statement. Ambivalence about familial connection, reluctance regarding public association, yet undeniable interest in professional observation. "Will you go?" Izuku asked, recognizing that direct questions might be more helpful than philosophical discussion. "I'm considering it," Todoroki admitted, his heterochromatic gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Not for his validation, but because seeing him operate at that level might be professionally instructive. The complexity of their relationship created layers that transcended simple acceptance or rejection. Whatever Endeavor's personal failings, and they were significant, his professional capabilities remained objectively impressive. Learning from his tactical approaches didn't require approving his personal history. "Observation doesn't mean endorsement," Izuku offered carefully. "You can learn from his professional capabilities while maintaining your own values and approach." Todoroki was quiet for a moment, processing this perspective. "That's part of adaptation, isn't it?" he asked finally. "Taking what's useful while discarding what's harmful, even when they come from the same source." The observation demonstrated remarkable insight into the fundamental principles that guided Izuku's unique ability. The adaptation wheel expanded slightly, processing this philosophical framing that transcended physical application. "Exactly," Izuku confirmed. "Adaptation isn't just about physical challenges. It's about processing complex information and extracting what serves positive development while rejecting harmful elements. Their philosophical exchange was interrupted by emergency alerts blaring from both their phones simultaneously. The synchronization suggested major incident rather than routine notification, and the adaptation wheel expanded to full manifestation as Izuku activated his device. Breaking news footage showed chaos unfolding in downtown Muzutafu, a massive creature with exposed brain tissue and multiple quirk modifications rampaging through commercial districts. The creature's appearance immediately registered in Izuku's memory, a high-end Nomu similar to the artificial being that had nearly killed All Might during their final confrontation. "That's less than 3 kilometers from here," Todoroki observed, his analytical mind immediately processing tactical implications. "And based on its appearance, a high-end Nomu," Izuku confirmed. "The adaptation will processing combat data from previous encounters alongside potential civilian risk in the densely populated area. Significantly more dangerous than standard models." The news footage shifted to show heroes responding to the crisis, and at the forefront, Endeavor's flaming form engaged the creature directly, his combat style showcasing the raw power and tactical precision that had earned his professional ranking. "It appears the new #1 hero is facing his first major test." The reporter's voice carried controlled urgency. Endeavor is engaging the creature, while Hawks evacuates civilians from the combat zone. Todoroki watched the footage with unreadable expression, his personal feelings about his father temporarily set aside as he analyzed professional response patterns. "His combat approach is technically impressive," he observed clinically. "Maximum offensive pressure while minimizing collateral damage through precise flame control." The assessment was accurate but incomplete. The adaptation will process deeper patterns in Endeavor's approach, not just technical execution but underlying psychological communication, where All Might's combat style had always incorporated reassurance alongside effectiveness. Endeavor's approach emphasized dominance and efficiency without equivalent emotional component. "He's fighting effectively," Izuku agreed, "but not connecting with civilians the way All Might would have." As they watched, the high-end Nomu demonstrated why these artificial beings represented such significant threat. Multiple quirks activated simultaneously, regeneration healing combat damage, strength enhancement matching Endeavor's raw power, and what appeared to be adaptive capabilities that processed attack patterns for improved countermeasures. "It's adapting to his techniques," Todoroki observed with growing concern, learning his combat patterns and developing counters after each exchange. The observation triggered increased processing from Izuku's adaptation wheel, which recognized familiar patterns in the Nomu's development. Whatever biological or technological mechanisms created these artificial beings had incorporated adaptive elements similar to his own unique ability, though clearly less sophisticated in implementation. The battle's intensity increased as Endeavor recognized the creature's adaptation capabilities. His flames burned with unprecedented brightness as he shifted from standard techniques to experimental approaches that sacrificed efficiency for unpredictability. "He's using unorthodox attack patterns," Izuku noted, professional assessment temporarily overriding philosophical concerns, making himself less predictable to counter the adaptation process. The tactical shift demonstrated genuine combat intelligence that justified Endeavor's professional ranking, regardless of personal complications. By sacrificing optimal efficiency for pattern disruption, he was effectively countering the Nomu's primary advantage. But as they watched, the battle took an unexpected turn toward greater danger. The high-end Nomu, recognizing that direct combat favored Endeavor's raw power, suddenly changed tactics, abandoning the immediate confrontation to target nearby civilians instead. "It's forcing a protection scenario," Izuku realized with growing alarm, testing whether he'll sacrifice combat advantage to prioritize civilian safety. The strategic shift created terrible dilemma for the new #1 hero. Maintaining offensive pressure might neutralize the threat more quickly but at unacceptable civilian cost. Prioritizing protection would create vulnerability that the Nomu could exploit for decisive advantage. For crucial moments, Endeavor's response seemed uncertain, his combat-oriented approach temporarily misaligned with protection requirements that transcended straightforward confrontation. But then his flames shifted from offensive configuration to protective barrier, creating thermal shields around endangered civilians while sacrificing his own tactical position. "He chose protection," Todoroki said quietly, genuine surprise in his voice, "even at personal cost." The choice proved immediately consequential. The Nomu exploited Endeavor's defensive repositioning to launch devastating counterattack, its combined quirks creating impact that sent the Flame Hero crashing through structural supports and into adjacent building with catastrophic force. "Endeavor," Hawks called from his aerial position, temporarily abandoning evacuation to assist his fallen colleague. But before he could reach the impact zone, the Noma intercepted with shocking speed, its adaptive capabilities having processed aerial movement patterns from previous observations. "It's getting smarter with each exchange," Izuku observed, the adaptation wheel spinning with increasing intensity as it analyzed the creature's development patterns. Processing combat data at accelerated rates, the observation carried disturbing implications about whoever had created these artificial beings. The incorporation of adaptive capabilities suggested deliberate evolution in their design, development specifically intended to counter hero responses based on previous encounters. On screen, Endeavor emerged from structural debris with visible damage but undiminished determination. His costume had partially disintegrated from combat intensity, revealing extensive scarring beneath professional presentation. But more significantly, his approach had shifted from individual dominance to collaborative strategy. "Hawks," he called, his voice carrying commanding authority despite injury. "Thermal updraft pattern 3. On my mark." The coordination suggested previous joint training or professional familiarity that transcended their public personas. Hawks immediately adjusted his flight trajectory, using Endeavor's intensified flames to create aerial maneuverability that ordinary physics wouldn't allow. "They've trained together," Todoroki realized, professional assessment temporarily overshadowing personal complications. Developed combination techniques for situations like this. The observation highlighted evolution in hero operations that hadn't been necessary during All Might's dominance, where the symbol of peace's overwhelming individual capability had often rendered collaborative approaches unnecessary. Post-All Might heroism required strategic cooperation to address threats beyond individual management. As Endeavor and Hawks executed their coordinated attack, the adaptation will process their tactical approach alongside broader implications for hero society's development. Perhaps the transition from symbolic individual to collaborative network represented necessary evolution rather than unfortunate necessity. The combined assault created offensive pressure that even the high-end Nomu's adaptive capabilities couldn't process quickly enough. Hawk's feather projectiles targeted regeneration nodes with precision that suggested detailed biological analysis, while Endeavor's flames reached temperatures that transcended standard combat applications. "Prominence burn," Endeavor announced as his flames concentrated to near-plasma intensity, creating thermal impact that overwhelmed even the Nomu's enhanced durability. The creature's final moments showcased the terrible extent of its modifications, multiple quirks activating simultaneously in desperate attempt to counter overwhelming force, biological structures regenerating even as they disintegrated, adaptive processes working at accelerated rates that suggested genuine intelligence beneath artificial construction. But ultimately, the combined hero assault proved sufficient. The high-end Nomu collapsed in smoldering heap, its threat neutralized through collaborative effort rather than individual dominance. As emergency services moved into the area and reporters swarmed toward Endeavor for statement, cameras caught moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability. The number one hero swayed slightly, combat injuries temporarily overwhelming even his formidable endurance. "He's hurt worse than he's showing," Todoroki observed quietly, professional assessment momentarily giving way to something approaching concern despite their complicated history. Before reporters could reach him, Hawks appeared at Endeavor's side, providing subtle support that maintained professional appearance while addressing practical needs. The assistance wasn't just physically supportive but psychologically significant, acknowledgement that even the number one hero sometimes required help. "That's the difference," Izuku realized, the adaptation while processing symbolic significance alongside tactical assessment. All Might created the illusion of individual invulnerability. Endeavor might actually establish more realistic heroic model, powerful but acknowledging human limitations. Todoroki was quiet for long moments, processing his father's performance with complex emotions that defied simple categorization. When he finally spoke, his voice carried careful neutrality that barely contained deeper currents. "He's changing," he acknowledged reluctantly. "Not enough to erase the past, but evolving nonetheless. Adapting to responsibilities that require more than just power." The observation carried weight beyond its literal meaning, a recognition that even someone as seemingly fixed as Endeavor could develop given sufficient motivation and circumstance. The adaptation will process this potential for growth alongside broader implications for healing familial wounds that had previously seemed permanent. "Growth doesn't erase history," Izuku agreed carefully, "but it can create different futures. Adaptation means evolving based on both success and failure, learning from both positive and negative experiences." As they continued watching the aftermath coverage, emergency services efficiently managing consequence mitigation while heroes maintain security perimeters. Todoroki made decision that clearly carried significant personal weight. "I'll accept his invitation," he said quietly. "Not for reconciliation, but for professional observation. Whatever his personal failings, his hero work contains elements worth studying." The statement represented meaningful development in its own right, recognition that complex relationships couldn't be reduced to simple acceptance or rejection. The adaptation will process the nuanced approach as indicative of emotional maturity that matched Todoroki's combat capabilities. "That seems like a healthy approach," Izuku affirmed, taking what's valuable while maintaining appropriate boundaries. As the news broadcast shifted to analysis of what this successful operation meant for public confidence in the new number one hero, Izuku found himself considering broader implications for hero society's evolution. Perhaps the transition from All Might's singular dominance to more distributed security model represented necessary adaptation rather than unwelcome compromise. The adaptation will process these considerations alongside tactical data from the high-end Nomus performance. Whoever created these artificial beings was developing increasingly sophisticated threats specifically designed to counter hero responses, evolution that would require corresponding adaptation from those responsible for public protection. Whatever comes next, Izuku thought as they watched Endeavor finally address media with uncharacteristic acknowledgement of Hawk's crucial contribution will require more than individual power. It will demand collaborative approaches that combine diverse capabilities toward shared purpose. The adaptation will spun with quiet certainty as night settled over UA campus. The era of singular heroic symbols had concluded, but perhaps what would replace it might ultimately prove more resilient. Adaptive networks that could evolve in response to whatever challenges emerged. Adaptation wasn't just individual capability, after all. Sometimes the most important evolutions happened at systemic levels, where collective growth transcended individual limitation. The massive training facility echoed with excited conversation as classes 1A and 1B assembled for their joint combat exercise. The arena's sophisticated design allowed for multiple environmental configurations, ensuring combat challenges that would test diverse quirk applications and tactical approaches. "This exercise represents more than standard training," Aizawa explained, his perpetually tired expression somehow more intense than usual. "It's comprehensive assessment of your combat readiness following provisional licensing and work-study experiences." Vlad King, Class 1B's homeroom teacher, stood alongside him with contrasting energy but matching seriousness. "You'll be divided into 5 teams per class, competing in structured matches that emphasize both individual capability and collective strategy." The atmosphere crackled with competitive energy, particularly among Class 1B students who viewed this exercise as opportunity to demonstrate progress that media coverage had often overlooked in favor of their more prominent counterparts. "Class 1A has received disproportionate attention," Monoma declared with characteristic dramatic flair. "But today we'll demonstrate which class truly deserves recognition." His theatrical proclamation might have continued indefinitely if not for Kendo's precise karate chop to his neck, her enlarged hand gently but firmly interrupting his monologue. "What he means," she clarified with apologetic smile, "is that we're looking forward to productive competition." Izuku surveyed both classes with thoughtful assessment, the adaptation wheel spinning quietly as it processed the combat potential assembled before him. Each student had grown significantly since their initial enrollment, not just in quirk application but in tactical sophistication and professional mindset. Before team assignments, Aizawa continued, "We have special participant joining today's exercise." The training facility doors opened to reveal Shinso Hitoshi, the general studies student whose brainwashing quirk had made memorable impression during the sports festival. His appearance carried subtle changes, more defined physicality suggesting intensive training, and what appeared to be support equipment similar to Aizawa's capture weapon. "Shinso will participate as floating member," Aizawa explained, joining different teams throughout the exercise. "His performance will be evaluated for potential hero course transfer, so treat these matches with appropriate seriousness." The announcement generated immediate interest, particularly among students who had witnessed Shinso's capabilities during previous interactions. His quirk's psychological application created tactical options that standard combat abilities couldn't match, potential that clearly warranted reassessment for hero training. As team assignments were announced and students began strategic planning, Izuku found himself approached by unexpected combination. Monoma from Class 1B and Shinso himself, both wearing expressions that suggested serious purpose beneath social awkwardness. "Divine General," Monoma began, his usual theatrical delivery temporarily subdued by genuine professional interest. There's something we'd like to discuss before the exercise begins. The adaptation will expand it slightly as it detected unusual emotional patterns beneath the straightforward approach. This wasn't standard pre-combat interaction, but something carrying deeper significance. What is it? Izuku asked, maintaining open body language that encouraged communication despite the competitive context. Your adaptation ability, Shinso said directly, his voice carrying the measured control of someone accustomed to careful word choice. It's creating ripple effects throughout the hero program that you might not fully appreciate. The statement carried implications beyond its literal meaning. Recognition that Izuku's unique capability wasn't just individual enhancement, but potential catalyst for systemic reevaluation. The adaptation will process this perspective alongside tactical considerations for the upcoming exercise. What kind of ripple effects? He asked, genuine curiosity overriding competitive preparation. Accelerated support development, Monoma explained, gesturing towards Shinso's equipment. Resources previously allocated towards standard combat enhancement have been partially redirected towards psychological quirk applications and adaptive technology. Shinso nodded confirmation. My brainwashing was considered limited utility until your adaptation demonstrated how non-standard capabilities could be integrated into hero operations. Now they're developing support equipment that expands application options significantly. The information carried both professional and philosophical significance. If Izuku's unique approach was influencing resource allocation and training priorities, his responsibility transcended individual development to include systemic impact. I'm glad, he said sincerely. Heroism shouldn't be limited to straightforward combat quirks. Psychological approaches create options that physical confrontation can't match. Their conversation was interrupted by announcement that team preparations should conclude, with matches beginning momentarily. As they separated toward their assigned positions, Monoma offered parting observation that carried unusual sincerity beneath his typically dramatic delivery. Your adaptation changes those around you, he said quietly. Not just through direct interaction, but through conceptual influence. Perhaps that's its most significant application. The perspective lingered in Izuku's thoughts as teams assembled for the first match. The adaptation will process implications alongside tactical preparation, considering how individual capability might influence systemic development in ways that transcended direct application. First match, Aizawa announced through the facility's communication system. Team Midoriya versus combined team from Class 1B with Shinso integration. Objective, capture or incapacitate opposing team members within 15-minute time limit. The team compositions created interesting tactical dynamics. Izuku would be working with Uraraka, Kaminari, and Ishido, combination of gravity manipulation, electrical discharge, and acid generation that offered diverse approach options. Their opponents included Monoma, Kendo, Shiozaki, and Shinso, copy quirk, enlargement, vine control, and brainwashing respectively. They've structured this deliberately, Uraraka observed as they conducted final strategy review. Testing how your adaptation handles psychological quirks alongside physical threats. The assessment was accurate and insightful. Standard combat exercises typically emphasized physical confrontation rather than mental manipulation, but this combination specifically challenged conventional tactical approaches. Shinso's brainwashing requires verbal response. Izuku reminded his teammates, the adaptation will spinning with increasing purpose as it processed optimal counter-strategies. Monoma can copy quirks through physical contact, but with time limitations. Kendo's enlargement provides raw power, while Shiozaki's vines offer environmental control. So basically, Kaminari summarized with characteristic directness: don't talk to the purple-haired guy, don't let the blonde touch you, watch out for giant hands, and avoid plant tentacles. Seems totally reasonable. Despite his sarcastic delivery, his summary demonstrated genuine tactical understanding beneath casual presentation. The adaptation will process this communication style as effective translation of complex information into accessible format. Valuable team capability that transcended direct combat application. Exactly, Izuku confirmed with appreciative nod. And our counter-strategy emphasizes distance management and environmental awareness. As they moved into the training arena, configured as urban environment with multiple elevation options and limited visibility, the adaptation will expand it to full manifestation. Combat against psychological manipulation required different processing priorities than standard physical confrontation, with particular emphasis on communication discipline and sensory filtering. They'll likely target me first, Izuku advised as they established initial position, using Shinso to neutralize adaptation before addressing our collective capabilities. So we use that expectation, Uraraka suggested, her tactical thinking having developed significantly through professional experience. Create defensive formation that appears to prioritize your protection while actually establishing counter-offensive options. The strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological components alongside physical positioning. The adaptation will process this approach with approval, recognizing how team dynamics could enhance individual capabilities through coordinated implementation. As the exercise countdown concluded and combat became authorized, Class 1B's team implemented unexpectedly aggressive opening move. Rather than cautious reconnaissance, they launched coordinated assault that suggested detailed pre-planning. Shiozaki's vines creating mobility platforms that carried teammates across urban terrain with unprecedented speed. They're not approaching cautiously, Kaminari observed with surprise. That's not standard Class 1B strategy. Because they're not following standard strategy, Izuku realized the adaptation wheel processing tactical implications. They're implementing specific counter-approach designed for our particular team composition. The realization demonstrated how seriously their opponents were taking this exercise. Rather than general combat preparation, they had developed targeted approach that specifically addressed Team Midoriya's known capabilities and potential combinations. Before further strategic adjustment could be implemented, Monoma's voice carried across the urban environment with unusual volume, support equipment amplifying his delivery for maximum coverage. "Attention, Divine General," he announced with theatrical flair that belied tactical purpose. "Your adaptation is indeed impressive, but have you considered its fundamental limitations?" The question seemed designed to provoke verbal response. Obvious attempt to create opening for Shinso's brainwashing quirk. But the adaptation will process deeper patterns in the communication approach, detecting layered strategy beneath apparent simplicity. "Don't respond," Izuku warned his teammates, activating full cowling at 60% as he prepared for imminent engagement. "They're trying to." His warning was interrupted by Shinso's voice, not from expected attack vector but from concealed position directly behind their formation. "Too late," he said simply, his support equipment projecting Monoma's voice pattern through sophisticated audio system. The tactical misdirection was impressive, using Monoma's announcement as distraction while Shinso approached from unexpected angle. But the adaptation wheel had been processing audio patterns with particular attention to psychological manipulation attempts, detecting subtle differences between genuine and projected voice characteristics. "Nice try," Izuku replied without turning, already moving to counter the actual threat rather than the apparent one. But adaptation includes sensory processing, not just physical enhancement. The revelation that his deception had been detected momentarily surprised Shinso, creating opening for Izuku's counter-movement. But the general studies student recovered with impressive speed, his support equipment deploying capture weapons similar to Aizawa's with practiced efficiency. "Interesting," Shinso observed as they engaged in close-quarters confrontation. "Your adaptation processes deception attempts alongside physical threats. That explains certain inconsistencies in previous performance reports. The clinical assessment during active combat demonstrated unusual psychological discipline, analyzing opponent capabilities while simultaneously implementing tactical responses. The adaptation will process this combat approach with increased attention, recognizing sophisticated opponent whose capabilities transcended straightforward quirk application." Around them, their teammates engaged in their own confrontations, Uraraka utilizing zero-gravity maneuverability against Kendo's powerful but movement-limited enlargement quirk. Kaminari carefully managing electrical discharge to counter Shiozaki's vine manipulation without causing excessive environmental damage. Ashido creating acid barriers that limited Monoma's approach options for potential quirk copying. "You've been training with Aizawa," Izuku observed as he processed Shinso's movement patterns, recognizing familiar combat approaches beneath unique individual implementation, incorporating his techniques while developing your own applications. "Perceptive," Shinso acknowledged, his capture weapon creating complex movement patterns that would have challenged less adaptive opponents. "Though that observation won't help you counter what comes next." The warning preceded unexpected tactical shift, Shinso's capture weapon suddenly deploying flashbang attachment that detonated at optimal disorientation range. The sensory overload would have temporarily incapacitated standard opponents, creating opening for brainwashing implementation. But the adaptation wheel had been processing Shinso's equipment alongside his combat patterns, developing countermeasures for potential support items based on observed design elements. As the flashbang deployed, Izuku's sensory processing had already adjusted, reducing light sensitivity while maintaining audio filtering that prevented Shinso's voice from triggering response mechanisms. Sensory adaptation, Izuku explained as he maintained combat effectiveness despite the disorientation attempt, processing external stimuli through modified neural pathways that filter overwhelming input. The explanation wasn't just combat communication but professional courtesy, acknowledging impressive attempt while providing information that might inform future development. The adaptation wheel processed this exchange as potential teaching moment alongside tactical necessity, recognizing how competitive exercise could enhance both participants regardless of outcome. Shinso's expression reflected momentary frustration before transitioning to something approaching professional appreciation. Adaptation that comprehensive changes fundamental combat dynamics, he observed, continuing tactical engagement despite his failed disorientation attempt. No wonder standard training approaches proved inadequate. Their exchange was interrupted by significant tactical development elsewhere in the combat zone. Monoma had successfully established physical contact with Kaminari, copying his electrical discharge quirk with evident intention of implementing area denial strategy. "Behold the Divine General's team when facing their own capabilities," he announced with characteristic dramatic flair, electrical energy crackling around his form as he prepared maximum discharge. But something unexpected occurred as he attempted full implementation. The copied quirk activated with greater intensity than anticipated, creating feedback loop that overwhelmed his control mechanisms. Rather than targeted discharge, the electrical energy dispersed chaotically, temporarily incapacitating Monoma himself through what appeared to be copied version of Kaminari's own discharge limitations. Monoma mumbled incoherently as the discharge concluded, his cognitive functions temporarily compromised just as Kaminari's would be following excessive output. "That's why understanding quirks matters more than just copying them," Kaminari observed with surprising insight beneath his casual delivery. "Without development experience, you don't recognize operational limitations." The observation carried significant implications regarding quirk mastery and adaptive development. Raw capability required experiential learning to achieve optimal implementation, knowledge that couldn't be simply copied alongside power manifestation. As the exercise continued, the adaptation wheel processed increasingly complex tactical patterns from both teams. Class 1. B's approach demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination despite Monoma's temporary incapacitation, while Team Midoriya developed responsive strategies that leveraged individual capabilities through collective implementation. Midoriya, Uraraka called from elevated position where she maintained aerial advantage through zero-gravity application. They're implementing pincer movement, Kendo and Shiozaki converging, while Shinso maintains direct engagement. The tactical assessment was accurate and timely. While Izuku's adaptation handled Shinso's increasingly sophisticated attack patterns, the remaining Class 1B members were establishing position for coordinated assault that would overwhelm even adaptive defenses through simultaneous approach vectors. Time for synchronized counter, Izuku confirmed, the adaptation wheel processing optimal response patterns for their team composition. Uraraka, gravity manipulation on my mark. Kaminari, targeted discharge through prepared conductors. Ashido, acid barrier implementation along northwestern approach. The coordinated response demonstrated leadership development alongside combat capability. Not just individual adaptation but team coordination that enhanced collective effectiveness. As his teammates moved into optimal positions, Izuku increased his full cowling to 70%, preparing for decisive engagement that would resolve the increasingly complex tactical situation. Now, he called the adaptation while achieving peak processing intensity as their counter strategy implemented simultaneously. What followed demonstrated the remarkable progress all students had achieved since their initial enrollment. Uraraka's zero-gravity application had evolved from simple object manipulation to sophisticated inertial control that affected momentum vectors alongside basic weightlessness. Kaminari's electrical discharge now incorporated targeted implementation that maintained cognitive function while achieving precise effect distribution. Ashido's acid generation had developed composition control that created strategic barriers with minimal environmental impact. And Izuku's adaptation tied these diverse capabilities together through tactical coordination that enhanced individual effectiveness while minimizing operational vulnerabilities. Class 1. B's team responded with impressive coordination of their own. Despite Monoma's compromised condition, Kendo implemented leadership protocols that maintained strategic coherence, while Shiozaki's vine control demonstrated remarkable precision that countered zero-gravity effects through environmental anchoring. Shinso, meanwhile, continued direct engagement with Izuku, his combat approach evolving in real time as he processed adaptation patterns and developed counter-strategies with impressive speed. Your adaptation learns from each exchange he observed during momentary pause in their confrontation, developing counters while simultaneously implementing offensive patterns. That's partly why I wanted to fight you specifically, Izuku replied, professional courtesy temporarily overriding competitive necessity. Psychological quirks create adaptation challenges that physical confrontation can't match. The acknowledgement seemed to impact Shinso more significantly than tactical advantage would have. For someone whose quirk had often been dismissed as unsuitable for hero operations, professional recognition from established hero student carried meaningful validation. After this exercise, Shinso said with quiet intensity, I'd appreciate your perspective on psychological quirk applications in professional contexts. Your adaptation might identify implementation options others have overlooked. The request demonstrated genuine professional interest beyond competitive positioning, recognition that collaborative development could enhance both their capabilities regardless of immediate exercise outcome. Absolutely, Izuku agreed. The adaptation wheel processing potential discussion topics alongside current combat requirements. Psychological approaches create resolution options that physical confrontation can't achieve. Their professional exchange concluded as the exercise entered its final phase. With time limitation approaching, both teams implemented increasingly decisive strategies intended to achieve clear outcome rather than prolonged engagement. Team Midoriya executed synchronized movement that leveraged their diverse capabilities through carefully coordinated implementation. Uraraka's zero-gravity created mobility advantages that Ishido enhanced through strategic acid placement, while Kaminari's controlled discharge established area denial that channeled opponents toward predetermined engagement zones. Izuku, meanwhile, utilized full cowling at 80%, higher output than standard training applications would justify, but appropriate given the sophisticated counter-strategies their opponents had demonstrated. The adaptation will maintain peak processing intensity, analyzing opponent patterns while simultaneously developing response protocols that addressed both immediate tactics and potential variations. The exercise concluded with technical victory for Team Midoriya, though the outcome reflected narrow margin that demonstrated both teams' impressive capabilities. As combat ceased and participants gathered for assessment review, the professional atmosphere reflected genuine growth beyond competitive positioning. Both teams demonstrated remarkable progress. Aizawa acknowledged, his perpetually tired expression temporarily softened by something approaching satisfaction. Tactical sophistication that transcends standard training expectations. Particularly noteworthy, Vlad King added with professional acknowledgement that overcame class rivalry was the adaptive coordination demonstrated by both teams. Not just individual capability, but collective implementation that enhanced overall effectiveness. As students received specific performance feedback and prepared for subsequent exercise matches, Izuku found himself approached by Shinso, whose expression suggested significant internal processing alongside professional interest. Your adaptation, he began without social preamble, direct communication style matching his practical approach to hero development. It's not just physical enhancement, is it? It processes conceptual challenges alongside tactical applications. The observation demonstrated remarkable perceptiveness, identifying fundamental aspects of adaptation functionality that most observers overlooked in favor of more visible combat applications. The adaptation will expanded slightly as it processed this assessment, recognizing sophisticated analysis that transcended superficial observation. That's accurate, Izuku confirmed, appreciating professional insight that justified detailed response. The wheel processes whatever challenges I'm facing, physical, tactical, psychological, even philosophical. It's constantly evolving based on accumulated experience and immediate requirements. Shinso considered this information with evident interest, his analytical mind processing implications that extended beyond immediate practical applications. That creates interesting possibilities for psychological quirk integration, he observed thoughtfully. If adaptation processes conceptual challenges, then brainwashing resistance isn't just about willpower but about developing cognitive structures that filter external influence attempts. The perspective demonstrated sophisticated understanding of neurological processing alongside quirk applications, insight that would enhance Shinso's professional development regardless of immediate hero course transfer outcome. Exactly, Izuku confirmed, genuine professional respect evident in his tone. Mental resistance isn't fixed capability but adaptive process that develops through accumulated experience and conscious implementation. Their conversation might have continued with further professional depth, if not interrupted by announcement of subsequent exercise matches. As they separated toward their respective team assignments, Shinso offered parting observation that carried both professional acknowledgement and personal significance. "Whatever the transfer assessment outcome," he said with quiet intensity, "I appreciate the perspective your adaptation provides. It creates possibilities beyond standard hero paradigms." The statement carried weight beyond its literal meaning, recognition that adaptive development transcended immediate capability to include conceptual evolution that might ultimately reshape hero operations more broadly. As subsequent matches unfolded throughout the training facility, Izuku found himself considering broader implications of what they were collectively developing. Each student's growth represented individual adaptation to professional requirements, but their combined evolution might ultimately create something more significant: new generation of heroes whose approach transcended the limitations their predecessors had accepted as inevitable. The adaptation will spun with quiet purpose as he watched his classmates demonstrate capabilities that would have seemed impossible during their initial enrollment. Whatever challenges emerged in coming months and years, this generation was developing response capacity that previous heroes might never have imagined possible. Adaptation wasn't just individual capability after all. Sometimes the most important evolutions happened collectively where diverse approaches combined toward shared purpose that transcended individual limitation. The adaptation will spun quietly behind Izuku as he watched the news broadcast, processing the implications of what was unfolding. Reports of increased villain activity across multiple prefectures had been dominating headlines for days, with analysts suggesting coordinated effort rather than isolated incidents. "The pattern suggests strategic purpose," Izuku murmured, eyes narrowed as he analyzed footage of aftermath scenes. "These aren't random attacks. They're testing response protocols." Around him, the common room of Heights Alliance had fallen unusually quiet as Class 1A students absorbed the gravity of what they were witnessing. Even Bakugo's typically explosive demeanor had subdued into focused concentration as he recognized the tactical patterns evident in the footage. "It's the League," Todoroki stated with quiet certainty, "but different somehow. More organized than their previous operations." Ida nodded agreement, his analytical mind processing the same conclusion. The response times, target selection, and withdrawal patterns all suggest enhanced tactical sophistication. They've evolved beyond their previous operational parameters. The assessment matched Izuku's own analysis. The adaptation will expanded slightly as it processed tactical implications alongside potential motivations. Something fundamental had changed within villain operations. Not just increased activity but qualitative shift in strategic approach. Aizawa entered the common room with unusually grim expression, immediately commanding attention through presence rather than declaration. When he spoke, his perpetually tired voice carried additional weight that emphasized the seriousness of the situation. "I've been authorized to share limited information about developing situations," he began without preamble. "What you're seeing on news broadcasts represents surface manifestation of deeper developments within villain society." The room fell completely silent as students recognized the exceptional nature of this briefing. Aizawa rarely shared operational intelligence beyond immediate training requirements, which made this disclosure particularly significant. "Intelligence sources indicate that the League of Villains has undergone fundamental transformation," he continued, his clinical delivery masking the concerning implications. "They've apparently merged with another organization called the Meta Liberation Army, creating what appears to be significantly larger and more structured entity." The revelation sent ripples of tension throughout the room. The League alone had proven formidable opponents despite their relatively small numbers and limited resources. Strategic alliance with another organization would create multiplicative threat rather than merely additive danger. Additionally, Aizawa continued after allowing moment for this information to register. "There are indications that Shigaraki has undergone some form of enhancement procedure that may have significantly increased his decay capabilities." This second revelation hit Izuku with particular force. The adaptation will spun with increased intensity as it processed potential implications. Shigaraki's decay quirk had already demonstrated terrifying destructive capacity during their previous encounters. Enhancement beyond those parameters created possibilities that defied comfortable consideration. "What kind of enhancement?" Bakugo demanded, his characteristic directness cutting through speculative tension. "Unknown specifics," Aizawa replied honestly, "but intelligence suggests all for one's involvement in whatever process was implemented." The reference to all for one transformed apprehension into genuine alarm. The adaptation will process historical context alongside present information, connecting patterns that suggested coordinated long-term strategy rather than opportunistic development. This information isn't being shared to create unnecessary anxiety, Aizawa clarified, recognizing the impact his briefing had generated. But as provisional license holders who have already faced extraordinary circumstances, you deserve accurate operational awareness rather than sanitized public narratives. The professional acknowledgement would have felt validating under different circumstances. Now it simply reinforced the gravity of what they were confronting. Threats significant enough to warrant exceptional information sharing with students still technically in training. What's being done? Ida asked, his question carrying practical focus that helped redirect anxious energy toward constructive consideration. Pro-heroes are coordinating response strategies, Aizawa replied, his measured tone suggesting complicated realities beneath straightforward statement. Intelligence gathering remains priority, while operational planning proceeds simultaneously. The clinical description masked what Izuku suspected was likely intense behind-scenes activity among hero agencies. The adaptation will process likely scenarios based on organizational protocols and historical precedents, suggesting comprehensive mobilization beneath public awareness. Will this affect upcoming work studies? Uraraka asked, giving voice to practical concern that many students likely shared. Currently undetermined, Aizawa replied honestly. Some agencies may suspend student participation given developing circumstances, while others might consider this optimal training opportunity despite elevated risk profiles. The assessment reflected complex reality of their educational situation, balancing professional development against security considerations during period of escalating threat. The adaptation will process these competing priorities alongside potential approaches for optimizing both concerns. For now, Aizawa concluded, maintain standard protocols while remaining particularly attentive to situational awareness. If circumstances change significantly, adjustments will be implemented accordingly. As he departed, leaving students to process this concerning information, conversations immediately erupted throughout the common room. Speculative theories competed with practical considerations as everyone attempted to integrate this intelligence with their existing understanding of villain activities. This changes everything, Kaminari stated with uncharacteristic seriousness. If they've actually merged organizations, we're talking about massively increased numbers and resources. And territory, Jiro added thoughtfully. The Meta-Liberation Army supposedly had cells operating nationwide even before their public activities diminished. Izuku remained silent. The adaptation will processing multiple information streams simultaneously. Tactical implications, strategic possibilities, historical precedents, and potential countermeasures. Whatever was developing represented fundamental escalation rather than merely intensified version of previous threats. Deku, Uraraka said quietly, noticing his intense concentration. What are you thinking? He considered her question carefully, organizing complex analysis into communicable assessment. This isn't just quantitative change, he replied finally. It's qualitative transformation. The League was dangerous but relatively unstructured, relying primarily on Shigaraki's leadership and individual member capabilities. Adding organizational infrastructure from established group creates entirely different operational profile. And if Shigaraki has actually undergone enhancement procedure, Todoroki began, leaving the concerning implications unspoken. Then we're potentially facing opponent whose decay capability exceeds anything previously encountered. Izuku completed the thought. The adaptation will spinning with increased intensity as it processed combat implications. Combined with organizational resources and territorial presence, he didn't need to finish the assessment. Everyone understood what such combination represented. Threat level beyond anything they had previously confronted, even during the most dangerous incidents of their training. So what do we do? Ishido asked, giving voice to the fundamental question underlying their collective concern. Prepare, Bakugo stated with surprising calmness beneath his typically aggressive delivery. Train harder, analyze more thoroughly, and develop counters for whatever they might implement. The straightforward approach reflected genuine growth in his professional perspective, focusing on constructive response rather than emotional reaction despite the concerning circumstances. The adaptation will process this development alongside tactical considerations, recognizing how their collective capabilities had evolved since initial enrollment. Bakugo's right, Izuku affirmed, standing as the adaptation will expand it to full manifestation. Whatever's developing, our response needs to be equally evolutionary. We can't just intensify previous approaches. We need to develop new capabilities that address emerging threats. His statement seemed to crystallize collective determination throughout the common room. Whatever anxiety Aizawa's briefing had generated was transforming into focused resolution, not dismissing the danger but refusing to be paralyzed by its implications. Enhanced team protocols. Ida suggested immediately, his organizational mind already processing improvement possibilities. Developing coordinated responses that maximize quirk combinations rather than just individual applications. And advanced scenario training, Yaoyorozu added, her analytical approach complementing his practical focus. Simulating potential encounter parameters based on intelligence assessments rather than just general combat preparation. As their classmates contributed additional development suggestions, the adaptation wheel continued processing broader implications alongside immediate considerations. Whatever was emerging within villain society represented evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from hero operations. Not just intensified effort but fundamental reconceptualization. The conversation continued late into evening, transitioning from speculative anxiety to constructive planning as students processed concerning intelligence through professional perspective rather than personal apprehension. By the time they separated toward individual rooms, collective determination had replaced initial alarm, not dismissing the danger but refusing to be defined by its implications. In his room, Izuku reviewed his notes from Aizawa's briefing alongside historical information about the Meta Liberation Army. The organization had largely disappeared from public awareness after its founder's arrest and apparent suicide, but underground analysis suggested continued operational presence beneath official notice. The adaptation will continue processing these considerations alongside strategic implications of potential merger with the League. Two fundamentally different approaches to villain operations, the League's chaotic destructiveness versus the Army's ideological structure, combining into hybrid entity with potentially complementary capabilities. And beneath these organizational concerns, the more immediately alarming possibility of Shigaraki's enhanced decay capability. The adaptation will process their previous encounters, analyzing how his quirk had already demonstrated frightening destructive potential even before whatever procedure might have amplified its parameters. As Izuku finally prepared for sleep, his mind continued processing these concerning developments alongside potential responses. Whatever emerged in coming weeks would likely test their collective capabilities beyond anything previously experienced. Evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from everyone involved in hero operations. The adaptation will pulsed with quiet certainty as he drifted toward uneasy sleep. Whatever changes villain society was undergoing, hero response would need to evolve accordingly, not just intensified effort but fundamental reconceptualization of how they approached their professional responsibilities. Adaptation wasn't just individual capability, after all. Sometimes the most important evolutions happened at systemic levels, where collective growth transcended personal limitations. Whatever challenges emerged, they would need to develop responses that matched the escalating threat. Not just fighting harder but fighting smarter, with approaches that addressed fundamental transformations rather than merely surface manifestations. The call came early morning, pulling Izuku from restless sleep into immediate alertness. His phone displayed Endeavor Agency's official contact, suggesting professional communication rather than personal outreach from Todoroki. Midoriya speaking, he answered formally. The adaptation will already expanding as it processed potential implications of early communication from the number 1 hero's office. This is Endeavor's administrative coordinator, a professional female voice replied. The number 1 hero requests your immediate presence at his agency headquarters alongside Todoroki Shoto and Bakugo Katsuki. Transportation has been arranged and will arrive at UA main entrance in 45 minutes. The formal request carried clear urgency despite its professional delivery. The adaptation will process this communication alongside recent intelligence briefings, suggesting connection to developing villain situations rather than routine training opportunity. Understood, Izuku confirmed. I'll be prepared and will inform the other students. After concluding the call, he immediately contacted Todoroki and Bakugo, finding both already awake despite the early hour. Neither seemed surprised by the summons, suggesting they had received similar communications or had been anticipating professional response to developing circumstances. About time, Bakugo commented with characteristic directness when they gathered at UA's entrance. Sitting around while villains organize has been driving me crazy. His impatience masked what Izuku recognized as professional concern rather than personal frustration. The adaptation will process his emotional patterns alongside tactical considerations, recognizing genuine growth beneath familiar aggressive presentation. Whatever's happening must be significant, Todoroki observed quietly. My father doesn't request assistance unless circumstances genuinely warrant additional resources. The assessment reflected accurate understanding of Endeavor's professional approach, prioritizing individual capability over collaborative operations unless situations specifically demanded combined response. The adaptation will process this observation alongside potential implications, suggesting serious developments beyond what Aizawa had shared during yesterday's briefing. When transportation arrived, sleek professional vehicle rather than standard hero transport, they were met by Burnin, Endeavor's sidekick whose green flaming hair and energetic demeanor contrasted with her serious expression. You three are being brought into operational planning rather than standard internship activities, she explained without preamble as they departed UA grounds. Intelligence developments overnight have accelerated response timelines significantly. The direct communication suggested genuinely concerning circumstances rather than merely intensified training opportunity. The adaptation will expanded further as it processed this information alongside potential scenarios that might warrant such unusual approach. What kind of intelligence developments? Izuku asked, professional focus overriding apprehension. Burnin glanced at him with assessing expression before apparently deciding that direct information was appropriate given their previous involvement in significant incidents. Two primary factors, she replied with professional directness. First, confirmation of organizational merger between League of Villains and Meta Liberation Army into entity now calling itself Paranormal Liberation Front. Second, intelligence from confidential source suggesting significant enhancement to Shigaraki's capabilities alongside accelerated timeline for whatever they're planning. The information matched Aizawa's briefing but with concerning addition of accelerated timeline that suggested imminent action rather than developing situation. The adaptation will process this update alongside tactical implications, analyzing potential response options and necessary preparations. Confidential source? Todoroki asked, his analytical mind immediately identifying the unusual element in her briefing. Classified, Burnin replied automatically before apparently reconsidering. But given your involvement level, limited confirmation that we have informational asset with access to PLF operational planning. The revelation generated immediate strategic implications. The adaptation will process this intelligence source alongside operational considerations, recognizing both valuable opportunity and concerning vulnerability inherent in such arrangement. Informants provided critical intelligence but also created potential compromise risks depending on their position and security protocols. How many heroes are being involved? Bakugo asked, his question reflecting tactical assessment rather than mere curiosity. Full mobilization authorization was approved overnight, Burnin replied, her professional tone masking the extraordinary nature of this response. All available heroes with appropriate capability classifications are being incorporated into operational planning. The scale of this response transcended anything they had previously experienced, even during major villain incidents. Full mobilization represented highest response level within hero operational protocols, typically reserved for catastrophic threats or nationwide emergencies. So this isn't just precautionary, Izuku observed quietly. The adaptation will processing these implications alongside historical precedents. You're expecting major confrontation. Burnin's expression confirmed his assessment without requiring verbal acknowledgement. The intelligence suggests comprehensive threat profile that warrants maximum preparedness. Specifics will be provided during operational briefing. The remainder of their journey proceeded in focused silence, each processing these concerning developments through their respective professional perspectives. The adaptation will continue analyzing potential scenarios alongside preparation requirements, developing response options for whatever they might encounter during coming operations. Endeavor Agency headquarters had transformed from professional office environment into operational command center, with multiple hero teams coordinating through sophisticated communication systems while support staff managed logistics and intelligence processing. The atmosphere crackled with focused intensity that reflected the seriousness of whatever was developing. Endeavor himself stood at central planning table, his flaming costume creating imposing visual presence that matched his #1 position. Around him, multiple high-ranking heroes from various agencies contributed to what appeared to be comprehensive operational planning rather than merely coordinated patrols. Good, you're here. He acknowledged their arrival with characteristic directness. Situation briefing begins in 5 minutes. This isn't standard internship activity. You're being incorporated into actual operations given your previous experience and capability assessments. The professional acknowledgement would have felt validating under different circumstances, Now it simply reinforced the gravity of whatever they were facing, threat significant enough to incorporate students into professional operations despite their limited experience. Before detailed briefing could begin, Izuku noticed familiar figure entering the command center, Hawks, the number 2 hero whose wings and casual demeanor contrasted with the tense atmosphere. What caught his attention wasn't merely the hero's presence but subtle details that triggered the adaptation wheel's processing. Slight tension in his movement patterns, carefully controlled expression that masked underlying stress, and what appeared to be minor injuries concealed beneath professional presentation. When the briefing began moments later, these observations gained significant context as Endeavor outlined the current situation with characteristic bluntness. Intelligence confirms that the entity now calling itself Paranormal Liberation Front represents merger between League of Villains and Meta Liberation Army. He began without preamble. Current estimates place their numbers at over 100,000 members nationwide, with hierarchical structure organized under lieutenants with specific operational responsibilities. The scale of this organization exceeded anything they had previously encountered by orders of magnitude. The adaptation will process these numbers alongside strategic implications, recognizing that this represented fundamental transformation of villain operations rather than merely intensified version of previous threats. Additionally, Endeavor continued, his flaming form intensifying slightly as he addressed more concerning aspects. Intelligence suggests that Shigaraki has undergone enhancement procedure specifically designed to amplify his decay quirk beyond previous parameters. Testing indicates destructive capability that could potentially affect entire city blocks rather than merely direct contact targets. This confirmation of Aizawa's warning hit with physical force. The adaptation wheel expanded fully as it processed combat implications of such dramatically enhanced capability. Shigaraki's decay had already demonstrated frightening destructive potential during previous encounters. Amplification to city block scale created tactical considerations that transcended standard combat approaches. Our information comes from embedded asset, Endeavor continued, gesturing toward Hawks who maintained carefully casual expression despite the serious subject matter. Details of this arrangement remain classified at highest security level, but operational intelligence has been deemed reliable through multiple verification protocols. The subtle reference to Hawks as intelligence source explained the tension Izuku had observed earlier. The adaptation will process this revelation alongside historical understanding of undercover operations, recognizing the extraordinary pressure such assignment would create, maintaining credible villain association while gathering critical intelligence without compromising hero objectives. Current assessment indicates that PLF is planning coordinated nationwide operation within approximately 4-week timeframe. Endeavor continued, his clinical delivery masking the alarming implications. Operational objectives appear to include both symbolic targets and infrastructure elements designed to demonstrate capability while undermining public confidence in hero effectiveness. As he outlined preliminary response strategies, the adaptation wheel continued processing broader implications alongside tactical considerations. This wasn't merely enhanced version of previous villain activities but fundamental evolutionary development, organized structure implementing strategic operations rather than chaotic destruction or isolated incidents. U3, Endeavor addressed them directly after concluding general briefing, will be incorporated into primary response team rather than support operations. Given your previous experience with League members and demonstrated capability during recent incidents, the assignment carried both professional acknowledgement and concerning implications. Incorporation into primary response meant direct confrontation with highest threat elements rather than perimeter security or civilian protection. Recognition of their capabilities but also placement into most dangerous operational parameters. Given Midoriya's adaptation ability, Endeavor continued with tactical directness. He will be specifically tasked with developing countermeasures for Shigaraki's enhanced decay with support from specialized analysis team. Bakugo and Todoroki will focus on tactical integration with professional teams addressing lieutenant-level threats. The specialized assignment reflected accurate assessment of their respective capabilities alongside operational requirements. The adaptation will process these responsibilities with increasing intensity, analyzing previous encounters with Shigaraki's decay while developing potential countermeasures for its enhanced parameters. As the briefing concluded and they were directed towards specialized preparation areas, Izuku found himself approached by Hawks, whose casual demeanor seemed particularly incongruous given the serious operational context. Divine General, Hawks greeted with characteristic informality that masked whatever strain his undercover assignment had created. Got a minute? There's something specific about Shigaraki's enhancement you should probably know. The direct approach suggested important information beyond what had been shared during general briefing. The adaptation will expand it further as it processed potential intelligence that might impact countermeasure development. Of course, Izuku replied, following Hawks toward more private area where sensitive information could be shared without broader audience. Once relatively isolated, Hawks carefully maintained casual expression shifted to something more serious, suggesting information of particular significance. The enhancement process Shigaraki underwent, he began quietly. It has similarities to procedures historically associated with All-for-One's quirk transfer operations. The revelation hit with unexpected force. The adaptation will process this information alongside historical understanding of All-for-One's capabilities, recognizing the concerning implications beneath Hawk's carefully measured delivery. Are you saying he received additional quirks? Izuku asked. The adaptation will spinning with increased intensity as it processed potential combat implications. Unconfirmed, Hawks replied honestly, but there are indications of capabilities beyond enhanced decay. Nothing concrete enough for official briefing, but something you should be prepared for given your particular ability. The warning represented professional courtesy beyond standard operational protocols, sharing unconfirmed intelligence that might prove crucial given Izuku's specialized assignment. The adaptation will process this information with particular attention, developing contingency approaches for potential quirk combinations beyond merely enhanced decay. I appreciate the information, Izuku acknowledged sincerely. It will definitely impact countermeasure development. Hawks nodded with uncharacteristic seriousness before his casual demeanor reasserted itself, professional mass that likely provided necessary psychological distance from his challenging assignment. Your adaptation ability is particularly suited for this kind of situation, he observed with analytical precision beneath casual delivery. The ability to process new threats in real time creates tactical options that standard training can't match. The assessment reflected sophisticated understanding of Izuku's capability beyond its surface manifestations. The adaptation will process this perspective alongside operational considerations, recognizing how his unique ability created responsibilities alongside advantages. It's still developing, Izuku admitted honestly. Each new challenge expands processing parameters, but there are still limitations I'm working to overcome. Hawks considered this information with thoughtful expression before offering perspective that carried weight beyond its straightforward delivery. That's the thing about adaptation, he said quietly. The process never actually concludes. You just keep evolving based on whatever challenges emerge. It's not about reaching final form, but about continuous development. The observation carried philosophical depth beneath practical assessment. The adaptation will process this perspective alongside its ongoing development, recognizing truth in Hawk's understanding of evolutionary processes rather than fixed endpoints. As they rejoined the main operational planning, Izuku found his mind processing multiple information streams simultaneously, tactical considerations for countering Shigaraki's enhanced decay, strategic implications of the PLF's organizational structure, and broader philosophical questions about adaptation as continuous process rather than defined destination. Whatever emerged in coming weeks would test their collective capabilities beyond anything previously experienced, evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from everyone involved in hero operations. The adaptation will pulse with quiet certainty as planning continued around him. Whatever challenges emerged, his ability would continue developing in response, not reaching final form but evolving continuously based on whatever threats manifested. Adaptation wasn't just reactive capability, after all. At its most fundamental level, it represented continuous evolution rather than merely responsive adjustment, developing new approaches rather than just intensifying existing ones. Whatever confrontation awaited them, it would undoubtedly push those evolutionary processes to unprecedented levels, demanding adaptation not just from individuals but from hero society as whole. The following weeks passed in blur of intensive preparation, with hero agencies coordinating unprecedented response to intelligence about the Paranormal Liberation Front's planned operations. Training facilities throughout the country operated at maximum capacity as professionals and students alike developed specialized approaches for anticipated confrontations. At Endeavor Agency, Izuku focused on his specialized assignment, developing countermeasures for Shigaraki's enhanced decay alongside analysis team dedicated to understanding Quirk's operational parameters. The adaptation will maintain constant processing as they reviewed available information and constructed theoretical models for its amplified capabilities. Based on previous encounters and recent intelligence, the lead analyst explained during particularly intensive session, we believe the enhancement creates exponential, rather than linear increase in propagation rate and affected volume. The technical assessment carried alarming tactical implications. The adaptation will process this information alongside combat scenarios, recognizing how such enhancement would fundamentally transform encounter dynamics rather than merely intensifying previous parameters. So it's not just stronger, Izuku clarified, the wheel expanding as it developed potential countermeasures, but fundamentally different in application scale. Precisely, the analyst confirmed. Previous manifestation required direct contact to initiate decay process with propagation limited to connected surfaces. Enhanced version appears capable of atmospheric propagation beyond initial contact point with significantly accelerated decay rate. The description suggested capability that transcended conventional combat approaches entirely. The adaptation will process this information with increasing intensity, developing theoretical countermeasures that addressed fundamental parameters rather than merely reactive defenses. What about material composition factors? Izuku asked, professional focus overriding the concerning implications. Are there substances with demonstrated resistance to decay effects? The question reflected analytical approach rather than mere apprehension, seeking specific information that might inform countermeasure development rather than focusing on threat level alone. The adaptation will process potential material applications alongside tactical approaches, considering how environmental factors might influence engagement parameters. Limited data suggests certain composite materials demonstrate increased resistance. Another analyst contributed, referencing specialized testing results. Though complete immunity appears unlikely given enhancement parameters, temporary resistance might create tactical options during critical encounters. This information generated immediate practical applications. The adaptation will process material specifications alongside combat approaches, developing integrated strategies that combined physical countermeasures with tactical positioning and quirk applications. Throughout these intensive preparation sessions, Izuku maintained regular communication with Bakugo and Todoroki, who focused on their own specialized assignments while sharing relevant information that might enhance collective effectiveness. Their professional collaboration demonstrated remarkable growth since their initial competitive dynamics, with complementary approaches enhancing overall preparation rather than creating operational conflicts. The lieutenant structure creates both vulnerability and challenge, Todoroki explained during evening strategy session, referencing intelligence about PLF's organizational hierarchy. Neutralizing key individuals could significantly disrupt coordinated operations, but their specialized capabilities represent concentrated threat factors rather than distributed risk. His analytical assessment reflected sophisticated strategic understanding beyond tactical applications. The adaptation will process this perspective alongside countermeasure development, recognizing how organizational structure created both operational opportunities and enhanced threat profiles. Intelligence suggests each lieutenant commands specialized unit with complementary capabilities. Bakugo added, his presentation reflecting professional focus rather than merely aggressive determination. Tactical approach needs to address both individual threat and unit coordination simultaneously. This layered challenge required integrated response rather than merely intensified effort. The adaptation will process these organizational factors alongside individual capabilities, developing approaches that addressed systemic structure rather than just component elements. As operational planning progressed toward implementation phase, Izuku found himself increasingly focused on potential contingencies beyond primary scenarios. The adaptation will process alternative possibilities alongside main operational parameters, developing responses for unexpected developments rather than just anticipated threats. During rare breaks from intensive preparation, he maintained contact with classmates who had been assigned to different agencies or operational elements. Their collective experiences painted a comprehensive picture of unprecedented mobilization throughout hero society, coordinated response that transcended standard protocols to address extraordinary threat level. Even underground heroes have been incorporated into operational planning, Azui reported during secure communication session, her practical perspective providing valuable insight into aspects beyond public awareness. Agencies that typically operate independently are coordinating through centralized command structure. The information highlighted exceptional nature of current response. The adaptation will process these organizational developments alongside tactical considerations, recognizing how systemic adaptation complemented individual preparation in addressing comprehensive threat profile. Support companies are working overtime producing specialized equipment, Yayarosa added from her position with agency focused on logistical operations. Custom applications designed specifically for anticipated confrontation parameters rather than general-purpose tools. This technological adaptation represented another dimension of comprehensive response. The adaptation will process equipment specifications alongside tactical applications, considering how specialized tools might enhance effectiveness during critical encounters. As operational timeline approached implementation phase, coordination among different elements intensified. Intelligence analysis continued refining target assessments while tactical teams finalized approach strategies and support operations established comprehensive logistics frameworks. 3 days before scheduled operation, final briefing assembled all primary response elements at secure facility designed for maximum coordination capability. Heroes from across operational spectrum gathered to receive updated intelligence and confirm implementation protocols before deployment to assigned positions. The atmosphere crackled with focused intensity that masked underlying tension. Despite comprehensive preparation, everyone recognized the extraordinary challenge presented by confronting organization of unprecedented scale with enhanced capabilities beyond previous encounter parameters. Intelligence confirms original assessment regarding PLF operational timeline. Endeavor began without preamble once all elements had assembled. Their coordinated action remains scheduled for day after tomorrow, with multiple simultaneous operations targeting both symbolic locations and critical infrastructure. The confirmation generated visible determination throughout assembled heroes. The adaptation will process this timeline alongside final preparation requirements, analyzing remaining optimization opportunities before actual deployment. Our response strategy remains unchanged. Endeavor continued, his flaming form intensifying slightly as he outlined implementation details. Simultaneous neutralization of all identified PLF facilities with priority emphasis on leadership elements and enhanced capability threats. The comprehensive approach reflected unprecedented coordination across hero agencies and operational specialties. The adaptation will process these integrated elements alongside individual responsibilities, recognizing how collective adaptation enhanced overall effectiveness beyond what separated efforts could achieve. Intelligence source has confirmed final target list and leadership locations. Hawks added, his casual demeanor maintained despite the extraordinary pressure his undercover assignment had clearly created. Operational planning has been verified through multiple assessment protocols. The confirmation carried significant weight given the crucial role intelligence played in operational success. The adaptation will process this verification alongside contingency planning, maintaining preparation for unexpected developments despite confirmed information. As briefing continued with detailed assignment confirmations and final coordination protocols, Izuku found his mind processing multiple considerations simultaneously. Tactical approaches for countering Shigaraki's enhanced decay, strategic positioning within primary response team, and broader implications of this unprecedented confrontation between hero society and evolved villain organization. Whatever emerged from coming operation would undoubtedly reshape hero-villain dynamics beyond immediate outcome. The adaptation will pulse with quiet certainty as briefing concluded and final preparations began. This confrontation represented evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from everyone involved, not just during immediate engagement but in response to whatever new parameters emerged from its resolution. The night before scheduled operation passed intense preparation as heroes throughout the country finalized equipment checks and mental readiness protocols. At Endeavor Agency's operational center, Izuku reviewed his countermeasure strategies one final time. The adaptation will processing potential scenarios alongside established response frameworks. No matter how much we prepare, Todoroki observed quietly as they conducted final equipment inspection, there will be unexpected elements we can't anticipate until actual engagement. The practical assessment reflected mature professional perspective rather than anxiety. The adaptation will process this observation alongside contingency planning, recognizing how adaptation during engagement would prove as crucial as preliminary preparation. That's where your ability becomes particularly valuable, Bakugo acknowledged with surprising directness. The wheel processes new threats in real time rather than requiring pre-established protocols. The professional acknowledgement demonstrated remarkable growth in their relationship since earlier competitive dynamics. The adaptation will process this development alongside tactical considerations, recognizing how their complementary approaches enhanced collective capability rather than creating operational conflicts. As morning arrived and deployment protocols activated, heroes throughout the country moved toward assigned positions with coordinated precision that reflected unprecedented preparation level. The adaptation wheel maintained peak processing as Izuku joined primary response team assigned to facility intelligence had identified as Shigaraki's location, the highest priority target given his enhanced capabilities and organizational significance. Remember primary objectives, Endeavor reminded as they approached deployment zone via specialized transport. Neutralization of enhanced threats takes precedence over standard confrontation protocols. Support elements will address peripheral resistance while primary teams focus on leadership targets. The tactical prioritization reflected professional assessment rather than merely aggressive approach. The adaptation will process these operational parameters alongside specific countermeasures, maintaining focus on primary assignment while preserving situational awareness for unexpected developments. As transport vehicles reached final approach coordinates and heroes prepared for synchronized engagement across multiple facilities, the adaptation wheel expanded to full manifestation. Whatever emerged from coming confrontation would undoubtedly test their capabilities beyond previous parameters, evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from everyone involved. The primary facility appeared outwardly unremarkable, mountain resort property that provided perfect cover for organizational headquarters while offering strategic advantages through elevated position and multiple approach vectors. But enhanced surveillance confirmed significant villain presence beneath civilian appearance, with thermal imaging showing movement patterns consistent with operational preparation rather than standard occupancy. All teams in position, communications coordinator confirmed through secure channel. Synchronized engagement on command authority. The final moments before operation commencement stretched with peculiar intensity, stretched seconds where everyone completed final mental preparation while maintaining optimal positioning for coordinated assault. The adaptation will process environmental factors alongside tactical considerations, analyzing approach vectors and potential resistance patterns while maintaining focus on primary objective. Operation commences in 3, 2, 1, engage. The coordinated assault activated with synchronized precision across multiple facilities nationwide. At primary location, Endeavor's flames created diversionary focus that enabled specialized teams to penetrate peripheral defenses while maintaining tactical cohesion despite resistance from PLF security elements. What followed was controlled chaos as heroes throughout the facility encountered varying resistance levels based on organizational positioning and individual capabilities. The adaptation wheel maintained comprehensive processing as Izuku moved with primary team towards central structure where intelligence indicated leadership elements would be located. We're encountering heavier resistance than anticipated in Northwest Quadrant, tactical coordinator reported through communication system, requesting additional support elements to maintain operational timeline. The development suggested either intelligence gap or strategic adjustment by PLF leadership. The adaptation will process this information alongside continuing advance, analyzing potential implications while maintaining focus on primary objective despite peripheral complications. As they penetrated deeper into the facility, resistance patterns shifted from standard security personnel to more specialized opponents with enhanced capabilities and coordinated tactics. The adaptation will process these evolving challenges in real time, developing countermeasures while maintaining progression toward central objective despite increasing operational complexity. Intelligence confirmation. Communications coordinator reported with sudden urgency. High-end Nomu detected in multiple engagement zones. Adjustment to tactical priorities authorized. The development carried significant operational implications. The adaptation will process this information alongside historical encounters with artificial beings whose multiple quirks and enhanced physical parameters created extraordinary threat profiles. Their presence suggested preparation level beyond standard expectations, indicating PLF leadership had anticipated potential hero response despite operational security protocols. As primary team approached central structure, environmental configuration shifted dramatically, transitioning from conventional building layout to specialized facility with reinforced construction and tactical design elements specifically created for defensive operations. The adaptation will process these architectural factors alongside advanced parameters, analyzing optimal approach vectors despite increased defensive advantages. Thermal imaging confirms multiple high-value targets within central chamber, intelligence coordinator reported, including confirmed signature matching Shigaraki profile. The confirmation focused operational intensity despite increasing resistance. The adaptation wheel expanded further as it processed imminent encounter with enhanced decay alongside potential additional capabilities based on Hawk's unofficial warning about possible quirk transfer elements. When they finally breached central chamber after overcoming multiple defensive layers, the scene that greeted them confirmed worst-case intelligence assessments, while adding concerning elements beyond anticipated parameters. Shigaraki stood at chamber's center, his appearance significantly altered from previous encounters. Physical enhancement evident alongside psychological development that suggested fundamental transformation rather than merely increased capability. But more alarmingly, he wasn't alone. Around him stood multiple high-ranking PLF members whose specialized capabilities created comprehensive threat profile rather than merely individual challenges. And throughout the chamber, specialized equipment suggested operational purpose beyond mere headquarters functionality, implementation facility rather than just command center. "Welcome, heroes," Shigaraki greeted with disturbing calmness that contrasted with his previously unstable presentation. "You've arrived exactly as anticipated." The statement carried concerning implications beyond its literal meaning. Suggestion that their supposedly secure operation had been compromised despite extensive counterintelligence protocols. The adaptation will process this possibility alongside immediate tactical considerations, analyzing potential information breach while maintaining combat readiness despite concerning development. Shigaraki Tamura Endeavor responded with professional directness that masked tactical assessment beneath confrontational presentation. "You and your organization are hereby placed under hero authority for crimes against public safety and violation of Cork regulation statutes." The formal declaration represented procedural requirement rather than expectation of compliance. The adaptation will process environmental factors alongside opponent capabilities, developing engagement strategies while maintaining vigilance for unexpected developments given concerning indications of operational compromise. Shigaraki's response wasn't immediate resistance, but disturbing laughter that suggested psychological transformation alongside physical enhancement. "You still don't understand what's happening," he said finally, his voice carrying unfamiliar confidence beneath familiar malice. "This isn't just another villain incident for you to resolve through superior numbers. It's fundamental transformation of the existing order." As he spoke, subtle changes became apparent in his physical presentation. Decay manifestation appearing around his hands without apparent activation, suggesting passive quirk enhancement rather than merely increased capability upon implementation. The adaptation will process these indicators alongside combat preparations, developing countermeasures for potentially spontaneous activation rather than just deliberate implementation. "Whatever philosophical justification you've constructed," Endeavor replied, maintaining professional focus despite concerning indicators, "your actions represent direct threat to civilian safety and societal stability. Surrender now or face appropriate force application." The standard declaration provided final opportunity for peaceful resolution despite minimal expectation of compliance. The adaptation will process opponent positioning alongside team distribution, analyzing optimal engagement patterns while maintaining preparation for various resistance scenarios. Shigaraki's response wasn't verbal but physical, sudden decay activation that propagated through floor material with unprecedented speed, creating structural disintegration that forced immediate tactical adjustment from all heroes present. The adaptation will process this manifestation with heightened intensity, analyzing propagation patterns while implementing countermeasures developed during preparation phase. Atmospheric propagation confirmed. Izuku called to teammates as he activated full cowling at 80%. The adaptation will guiding precise movement that avoided decay spread while maintaining tactical positioning. Implementation matches enhanced parameters from intelligence assessment. The confirmation provided crucial operational information despite concerning capability demonstration. Around him, professional heroes implemented specialized countermeasures with impressive coordination despite the extraordinary threat level, thermal barriers from Endeavor creating temporary decay boundaries while mobility specialists maintained positional advantage despite compromised environmental stability. What followed was combat unlike anything they had previously experienced. Not merely intensified version of standard villain confrontation, but fundamentally different engagement parameters that demanded continuous adaptation rather than merely predetermined tactics. The adaptation will maintain peak processing as Izuku implemented specialized countermeasures while developing new responses based on real-time observations of Shigaraki's enhanced capabilities. His decay isn't just stronger, Izuku observed as engagement intensified. The adaptation will analyzing propagation patterns alongside resistance factors. It's fundamentally different in operational mechanism, sequential molecular dissolution rather than merely accelerated breakdown. The technical assessment provided crucial information for collective response despite continuing combat pressure. Around him, professional heroes adjusted their approaches based on this analysis, implementing refined countermeasures that addressed fundamental mechanisms rather than merely surface manifestations. As confrontation continued with increasing intensity, additional concerning elements became apparent beyond Shigaraki's enhanced decay. His physical capabilities demonstrated parameters beyond previous encounters, enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and what appeared to be sensory processing beyond standard human limitations. Multiple enhancement factors confirmed. Izuku communicated to teammates as the adaptation will process these observations alongside continuing countermeasure implementation, suggesting comprehensive modification rather than merely quirk amplification. The assessment aligned with Hawk's unofficial warning about potential quirk transfer elements in enhancement procedure. The adaptation will process these multiple capabilities alongside tactical considerations, developing integrated countermeasures that addressed comprehensive threat profile rather than just individual elements. Throughout the facility, similar high-intensity confrontations unfolded as hero teams engaged PLF leadership elements and specialized combatants. Communication system provided fragmented updates that suggested mixed outcomes, successful neutralization in some sectors alongside concerning resistance in others, with overall operational progress maintaining acceptable parameters despite elevated challenge level. High-end Nomu contained in Southern Quadrant. Tactical Coordinator reported during momentary communication window. Hawks and Specialized Team have neutralized twice in Dabi, though with significant collateral effects. The mixed reporting reflected operational complexity across multiple engagement zones. The adaptation will process this information alongside immediate tactical considerations, maintaining focus on primary objective while preserving awareness of broader operational context. As Central Chamber confrontation reached critical intensity, Shigaraki's enhanced capabilities demonstrated concerning evolution beyond initial parameters, decay propagation accelerating further, while additional quirk manifestations became increasingly apparent. The adaptation will process these evolving threats in real time, developing countermeasures while maintaining offensive pressure alongside professional heroes despite escalating challenge level. He's implementing multiple quirks simultaneously. Izuku confirmed as Shigaraki demonstrated what appeared to be impact negation alongside enhanced decay and physical parameters, suggesting successful integration of additional capabilities beyond original decay. The confirmation carried alarming tactical implications beyond immediate engagement. The adaptation will process this development alongside historical understanding of all for one's quirk transfer capabilities, recognizing concerning parallels that suggested deeper connection than merely enhancement procedure. Despite these concerning developments, coordinated hero response maintained operational effectiveness through integrated approach that combined specialized capabilities with tactical coordination. Endeavor's flames created containment parameters while mobility specialists maintained positional advantage, and support elements implemented specialized countermeasures developed during preparation phase. Izuku's adaptation proved particularly crucial as Shigaraki's capabilities continued evolving during engagement, the wheel processing new manifestations in real time while developing countermeasures that addressed fundamental mechanisms rather than merely surface expressions. His full cowling implementation reached 90% as combat intensity demanded maximum capability deployment despite physical strain implications. Midoriya, Endeavor called during momentary tactical repositioning, your adaptation is providing crucial response data. Maintain analytical processing while support elements implement containment protocols. The professional acknowledgement reinforced specialized role within operational framework. The adaptation will maintain peak processing as Izuku balanced analytical observation with direct engagement, providing crucial information while implementing effective countermeasures despite escalating threat parameters. As confrontation approached apparent resolution point with coordinated hero pressure creating progressive containment despite Shigaraki's enhanced capabilities, unexpected development shifted engagement dynamics dramatically. What appeared to be predetermined signal activated structural changes throughout facility. Specialized equipment engaging despite damage sustained during initial confrontation phases. Something's happening, Izuku warned as the adaptation wheel detected energy patterns inconsistent with standard environmental factors. Facility systems activating despite operational disruption. The observation provided crucial warning despite incomplete understanding of specific threat parameters. Around them, specialized equipment generated increasing energy signatures that suggested purpose beyond standard facility functions, implementation protocols rather than merely support systems. Before coordinated response could address this new development, Shigaraki's expression shifted to disturbing satisfaction despite apparent tactical disadvantage. Right on schedule, he stated with uncharacteristic calmness. The doctor's final gift activates regardless of momentary setbacks. The cryptic statement carried concerning implications beyond its literal meaning. Suggestion of predetermined implementation regardless of immediate confrontation outcome. The adaptation will process potential meanings alongside facility activations, analyzing possible threat parameters while maintaining combat readiness despite uncertain developments. What followed transcended concerning into genuinely alarming as energy patterns throughout facility coalesced around Shigaraki's position, not external attack but apparent activation of enhancement process beyond initial parameters. The adaptation will process these manifestations with increasing urgency, analyzing potential outcomes while developing countermeasures despite unprecedented threat characteristics. Fall back. Endeavor ordered with professional assessment overriding offensive pressure. Unknown energy manifestation suggests implementation protocol beyond standard combat parameters. The tactical adjustment reflected appropriate caution despite operational timeline implications. The adaptation will process retreat vectors alongside continuing analysis, maintaining situational awareness while implementing protective protocols despite concerning energy manifestations. As heroes establish containment perimeter around increasingly concerning energy phenomenon, Shigaraki's physical form began demonstrating alarming transformations beyond enhanced parameters. Structural changes suggesting fundamental reconstitution rather than merely capability amplification. The adaptation will process these manifestations with maximum intensity, analyzing potential outcomes while developing countermeasures for various emergent scenarios. This isn't just enhancement activation. Izuku realized as the adaptation will integrated multiple information streams into coherent assessment. Its implementation protocol for something beyond current parameters, transformation rather than merely amplification. The analysis provided crucial context despite incomplete understanding of specific threat characteristics. Around them, professional heroes implemented specialized containment protocols while support elements established enhanced monitoring to track whatever emergence might follow current energy manifestations. As transformation process reached apparent culmination point with energy patterns stabilizing around Shigaraki's substantially altered form, communications systems suddenly activated with urgent reporting from multiple engagement zones. Similar energy manifestations detected at multiple PLF facilities. Tactical coordinator reported with controlled urgency beneath professional delivery, suggesting coordinated implementation rather than isolated phenomenon. The information carried alarming strategic implications beyond immediate tactical concerns. The adaptation will process this broader context alongside specific threat assessment, recognizing coordinated implementation that suggested comprehensive strategic planning rather than merely local contingency. Before coordinated response could address these concerning developments, Shigaraki's transformed form suddenly stabilized into configuration that maintained recognizable elements despite substantial alterations. Enhanced physical parameters alongside what appeared to be integrated technological components suggesting cyberization beyond biological enhancement. The doctor always had contingency plans, he stated with disturbing clarity despite physical transformation. This isn't failure, but merely acceleration of intended timeline. The statement carried strategic implications beyond immediate confrontation. The adaptation will process potential meanings alongside observed transformations, analyzing broader context while maintaining tactical focus despite concerning developments. What followed defied standard combat parameters entirely as Shigaraki's transformed capabilities demonstrated destructive potential beyond even enhanced expectations. Decay propagation achieving atmospheric distribution that required immediate specialized countermeasures from all heroes present. The adaptation will process these manifestations with maximum intensity, implementing developed countermeasures while analyzing operational mechanisms for potential weaknesses despite extraordinary threat level. Full evacuation authorized, endeavor declared through communication system, professional assessment recognizing when tactical withdrawal represented appropriate response rather than merely retreat. Priority on personnel extraction with secondary emphasis on information recovery. The order reflected mature leadership rather than merely combat focus, recognizing when situation parameters exceeded acceptable engagement thresholds despite operational objectives. The adaptation will process evacuation vectors alongside continuing threat assessment, maintaining protective implementation while facilitating coordinated withdrawal despite continuing destructive manifestations. As heroes throughout facility implemented coordinated evacuation protocols, while maintaining minimal containment pressure, Shigaraki's transformed form demonstrated concerning mobility despite apparent implementation disruption from hero assault. The adaptation will process these movement patterns alongside evacuation requirements, developing interference approaches that maintain separation between transformed threat and withdrawing personnel despite limited engagement capability. We need specialized containment rather than standard combat approach, Izuku realized as the adaptation will integrated observed capabilities into comprehensive assessment. This transformation transcends quirk enhancement into something fundamentally different. The analysis reflected professional assessment despite concerning circumstances. Around him, specialized heroes implemented temporary containment protocols, while support elements facilitated evacuation coordination despite continuing facility degradation from both combat damage and decay propagation. As evacuation reached advanced implementation with majority of hero personnel having achieved extraction vectors, Izuku found himself among final containment elements maintaining separation between Shigaraki's transformed form and withdrawal corridors. The adaptation will maintain peak processing as he implemented specialized countermeasures developed during engagement while facilitating final evacuation phases despite increasing facility instability. Midoriya, extraction window closing. Communications coordinator warned with professional urgency. Facility structural integrity compromised beyond sustainable parameters. The warning reflected accurate assessment of deteriorating conditions. The adaptation will process remaining extraction options alongside continuing containment requirements, developing final approach that would maintain separation while achieving personal extraction despite narrowing opportunity window. As he implemented this final maneuver, creating momentary disruption that temporarily redirected Shigaraki's attention while establishing extraction vector through compromised facility section. Unexpected development created additional complication. What appeared to be predetermined implementation protocol activated within Shigaraki's transformed form, generating energy signature that suggested teleportation capability rather than merely enhanced mobility. He's implementing spatial displacement. Izuku warned through communication system as the adaptation will process this new manifestation. Potential extraction beyond containment parameters imminent. The warning provided crucial information despite limited response options given extraction phase timing. Around remaining containment elements, specialized heroes attempted final disruption protocols while support systems recorded whatever data could be preserved before complete facility compromise. Before coordinated response could address this final development, Shigaraki's transformed form suddenly vanished with spatial displacement effect that confirmed teleportation capability beyond enhanced mobility. The adaptation will process this implementation alongside immediate safety requirements, prioritizing final extraction given irreversible containment breach despite concerning strategic implications. As remaining heroes achieved extraction before complete facility collapse, operational coordination transitioned to assessment phase, processing available information while establishing monitoring protocols for transformed threat despite containment failure. The adaptation will maintain active processing as Izuku joined consolidation point where surviving operational elements gathered to assess outcomes and establish response protocols for dramatically altered strategic situation. Preliminary assessment confirms similar developments at multiple engagement zones. Tactical coordinator reported once sufficient information had been consolidated, transformed PLF leadership elements implementing coordinated withdrawal rather than continued engagement despite apparent capability advantage. The information carried concerning strategic implications beyond immediate tactical outcomes. The adaptation will process this broader context alongside specific encounter data, analyzing potential motivations while developing response options despite incomplete understanding of transformed capabilities. This wasn't defeat but strategic repositioning, endeavor assessed with professional clarity despite obvious combat strain. They achieved implementation objectives regardless of our operational intervention. The analysis reflected mature leadership perspective rather than merely combat assessment. The adaptation will process this strategic framing alongside tactical observations, recognizing how confrontation represented planned phase within broader implementation rather than decisive engagement despite operational scale. As preliminary medical assessment confirmed no critical casualties despite numerous injuries among hero personnel, operational focus shifted toward information processing and response planning rather than immediate re-engagement. The adaptation will maintain active processing as Izuku participated in specialized debriefing sessions designed to extract maximum analytical value from direct encounter with transformed threat despite incomplete containment outcome. Your adaptation provided crucial information despite containment failure, assessment specialist acknowledged during particularly intensive session. Processing mechanisms and operational parameters that standard observation couldn't capture given implementation speed and complexity. The professional acknowledgement reinforced specialized contribution within operational framework. The adaptation will process this recognition alongside continuing analysis, developing comprehensive assessment while identifying potential countermeasures despite extraordinary challenge parameters. As days following operation transitioned from immediate response to strategic planning, the broader implications of what had occurred became increasingly apparent. Rather than decisive resolution to villain threat, The massive coordinated operation had instead witnessed emergence of transformed danger beyond previous parameters. Evolutionary development that would demand corresponding adaptation from hero society despite concerning capability disparities. We're entering fundamentally different operational environment, Hawks observed during strategic planning session that assembled key heroes from throughout response framework. Not just enhanced version of previous threat profile, but qualitative transformation that demands corresponding evolution in our approach. The assessment reflected sophisticated understanding beyond immediate tactical considerations. The adaptation will process the strategic perspective alongside specific countermeasure development, recognizing how systemic adaptation would prove as crucial as individual capability in addressing transformed threat landscape. As hero society began implementing comprehensive response to dramatically altered strategic situation, Izuku found himself increasingly focused on fundamental adaptation rather than merely tactical countermeasures. The wheel maintained continuous processing as he integrated encounter data with theoretical models, developing approaches that address transformed capabilities while recognizing broader evolutionary implications. This isn't just about countering specific threats anymore, he explained during analysis session with classmates who had participated in different operational elements. It's about developing adaptive framework that can respond to continuous evolution rather than merely predetermined parameters. The perspective reflected mature professional understanding beyond immediate tactical concerns. Around him, fellow students processed this approach with growing recognition of its implications, not just intensified training but fundamental reconceptualization of how they approached hero operations in transformed environment. As society absorbed concerning implications of what had occurred, public information carefully managed to prevent unnecessary panic while providing sufficient awareness for appropriate caution. Hero agencies throughout the country implemented accelerated development protocols focused on adaptive capability rather than merely enhanced power. The adaptation will process these systemic responses alongside individual preparations, recognizing how collective evolution might ultimately prove more significant than merely personal development. Whatever emerged from transformed threat landscape would undoubtedly test their capabilities beyond anything previously experienced, evolutionary pressure that would demand corresponding adaptation from everyone involved in hero operations. The adaptation wheel pulsed with quiet certainty as preparation continued despite uncertain parameters. This wasn't conclusion but merely transition point in ongoing evolutionary process, adaptation responding to adaptation in continuous development without final resolution. The future would undoubtedly bring confrontations beyond current parameters, with transformed threats implementing capabilities that transcended established countermeasures. But corresponding adaptation would develop in response, not just reactive adjustment but proactive evolution that addressed fundamental challenges rather than merely surface manifestations. Adaptation wasn't just individual capability after all. At its most fundamental level, it represented continuous evolution rather than merely responsive adjustment, developing new approaches rather than just intensifying existing ones. Whatever challenges emerged, corresponding growth would develop in response, not reaching final form but evolving continuously based on whatever threats manifested. The wheel continued spinning with quiet purpose as society adjusted to transformed reality. Whatever came next would demand unprecedented adaptation, but that was, after all, the fundamental nature of evolutionary processes. Challenge and response, threat and countermeasure in continuous development without ultimate conclusion. Yo, that was one for the books. Gentle and La Brava just got a redemption tease. Aries' heart cracked open to happiness. And Deku. Deku's not just adapting anymore, he's reshaping the meaning of being a hero. Much love for the insane support, ChronoCrew. Drop your thoughts and wildest theories in the comments. I might use M in the next part. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. We're on a collision course with something massive in part 7. You already know, ChronoCrew doesn't just watch timelines, we rewrite them. See y'all next time.